So let's start with the questions on what we said yesterday. So we can see that here online we have on slide already some questions. So we'll start from that, and then we can also take questions from the floor. True. Yes. Which one? The 2.0, 2.1. I will open both then in case. Now we go for the one to change the difference. Okay. Let's start with the first question. And actually, this first question I leave to you, York. SORA 2.5 claims to be purely quantitative on the ground risk model to avoid discussions as long as we have data. Nevertheless, M1A imposes that both a qualitative and a quantitative approach, which seems to undermine the origin intent. Can you please explain why M1A has been designed in this way?
Well, the simple answer is because we kept fighting over how to do M1 properly until we reached a compromise. On a more serious note, this is one of the biggest changes in SORA 2.5. The whole M1 was redesigned. We have the M1B part, which is the VLOS mitigation, and M1A is basically it's, as the name implies, the strategic mitigation. So the problem is you need both, if you think about it. The shelter mitigation, for instance, is pretty much qualitative. But what does it mean it is qualitative? It means, well, we know that roughly 90% of people are inside and sheltered most of the time. There's actually some research data on this, but do you know that in your city, this is actually true every day? It most likely is, but that's beside the point. Where do we end? How can we do an analysis quantitatively to find out how many people in the city of Cologne at a typical hour of the day are sheltered and how many are not? There's no way to do this quantitatively. So qualitative is the only real option. We know it's true, but we cannot say the exact percentage. And in the larger scale of things, it doesn't matter much. What I mean by this? The SORA is trying to put every authorized operation at equal risk, no matter what you are. If you are sail 6 in a city or sail 1 over the ocean, it doesn't matter. In theory, it should all be the same risk per flight hour. That's the good news. So this is an orders of magnitude game. So all the different contributive factors have to be in the right orders of magnitude. If you're going to have a debate, do we need 95%, 90%, or 85%? Then it becomes kind of, well, we can have that debate. It's fun, but not really doing anything. Or as the former leader of the work group used to say, 85, 90, to me, that's the same number. Now, we also give the option to do quantitative mitigations. And for instance, it can become quantitative if you are managing to have dynamic information on how many people are in the area. That was been really interesting, cool. If we have a good data source and we can show, look, the population density of this part of the city of Cologne from statistics is, well, there's 5,500 people that actually live there in that area per square kilometer. Good. So we can do the GRC. But if we had a source that can show that some times of the day, we know where it falls below 2,500, which is the threshold to a lower GRC, we can then basically say, well, if that is met and we actually have numerical data on how many people are actually, because of, everyone has their cell phones, we know how many people are logged in that area, because they've all gone to work maybe, so the population density during the day is a lot lower. It's possible, right? Now we have this information. But then we also have the shelter factor, because the people that stayed at home are most likely sheltered. So we have a quantitative number, a qualitative number, and if I explain, if I understand Mr. Anonymous correctly, it's like, why do you do both? Because we frankly don't have a better idea, because we think we have to do it that way. That was my answer. Discussion? Let's do it.
From the Belgian Bay. You mentioned the question.
Yes.
What you can define the population as population.
So can you repeat the
Yes, I will repeat the question. The question was this: I mentioned the ocean. How would I set the population density of the ocean? Well, if you ask census data, you will find out that nobody lives there. Is it completely empty? No. I would classify it, if it was my decision at if I examine an author, an application, I would say it is not controlled ground, because it isn't controlled unless it is a restricted area on the ocean, which also exists. Or we can justify, look, it's in the middle of the Atlantic, or it is close to the South Pole, there is no one around, and we know. Then you could classify it as controlled. But generally speaking, it would be very sparsely populated. So that's the threshold would be, is it the 3 or the 30? I think 30. That's what I would use. I mean, most ocean operations are actually not flying over the wide ranges of ocean, but close to the coast. So it's not exclusively, I know, but. So that would be my answer. That's what I would do. But in the end, it's at the discretion of the authority that is evaluating that application. That's how I would do it.
Okay, thank you. We can go to the next question that apparently also is getting a lot of votes.
Can I add one more thing?
Yeah.
Let's speak about this transition of the ground risk model to quantitative. Are we changing from a qualitative model to a quantitative one? Yes and no. What do I mean by that? SORA 2 is qualitative. It knows controlled ground, sparsely populated, and populated areas, and assembly of people. SORA 2.5 is more granular because of the knowledge gained mostly from the work of Annex F. I mean, we had a quantitative model for the original SORA Table 2, but we never published it. What was done is based on the ideas of the old model and a lot of research under the guidance of Terry Martin. The authorities put together the new Annex F ground risk model, and based on the experience gained and all the discussions, we were able to further refine the ground risk table. Now, the problem is, where do you get the data from? Honestly speaking, you can still use it qualitatively. It's still possible. You're not forced as an authority to go full numerical. And that's especially helpful if you don't have a good data source for your country. If somebody's arguing like, is it 255 people or 245 people per square kilometer in that area? That is, you don't have that accurate. So there is still a qualitative element, and some educated decision must be made anyway. The quantitative part, the option that you can refine your actual GRC score because you have an unusual configuration, that is quantitative. But basically, the Annex F part with all the equations doesn't have to be used. It is an option. It's there to explain why the ground risk table exists like it is. And the other option it poses is, if you have an unusual configuration that is unfairly rated in the GRC table, then you can use this knowledge and correct it. So you can still use the SORA 2.5 in a qualitative way. It shouldn't be no problem. And it's not going to deteriorate safety. Or another quote from Lorenzo, who's unfortunately not here today, was, the difference between qualitative and quantitative assessment is that you make the assumption somewhere else.
Okay, thank you. So I think let's try to move to the next question. What about US manufacturer obligation in case of providing drone data sheet for design verification or for SORA processes? they are not willing to share that kind of information. We are blocked as US operator. So this is a something that we have received this feedback several times. So we are aware, and so the problem is that today SORA is all around the operator. So the operator is the one responsible to collect all the information and present to the competent authority all the evidences, including the compliance with the design requirements of the drone. Yeah, and sometimes the operator is not the manufacturer, may have some challenges. So when a design verification report, so Cell 4 is required, or where a type certificate for Cell 5 and Cell 6 is required, that it's easy fix, because then the document issued by EASA can be used as a demonstration of compliance, so there is no need to additional coordination between operator and manufacturer. So between Cell 1 and Cell 3, yeah, we have at this moment this problem. We are discussing how we can fix. We have some discussion with all the authorities. So at this moment, we are evaluating different options. Options, I don't know, maybe also that there will be some kind of declaration that will be provided by the manufacturer based on standards that will be recognized by us and will be published on as AMC in the future. Then when the manufacturer declare compliance with the standard, they can declare that their drone is compliant with Cell 1, Cell 2, Cell 3. Well, as we said before, some drones in Cell 1 and Cell 2 maybe also will be enough that they have a C marking with C3, C5, or C6, or when the standard for the C3, C5, and C6, so the standard for each developed by ASD Stan, will be published. Even if they don't have a C5 or C6, we may recognize that those standards are acceptable, at least for Cell 1 and Cell 2. So the option that we are considering still is not finalized the discussion, but so to identify the standards and allow manufacturer to declare, and then this kind of declaration to be used by operator to show compliance. So it's something that we are working, we will get there, but we need to have still some standards.
My take on the same question is, it's a market problem, actually. If a drone is only fully usable if the manufacturer discloses design information either to the customer, the operator, or to an authority through the DVR process, for instance, and is not willing to do that, he cannot sell his drone for this kind of operation, period. The biggest problem is that there are some operators out there that have already bought their drones, and now they can't get the documentation for those drones. I mean, why would the manufacturer be interested? He's already sold the drone, right? I mean, but in the long game, I think this is a temporal situation. There might be some manufacturers where they think, okay, the specific operations market is so small compared to our standard market in the open category, we simply don't care. That's a possibility. But I'm not sure this is not really a SORA problem, but it's a dilemma for the manufacturers of what they want to do, what they want to sell their drone for, and for what price.
Please flip.
Good morning to everyone. If I may, there is another question that the manufacturer comes voluntarily to answer, obtain design, and then off to its customers the design verification level, not design verified by us. And I don't know whether the market will go in this direction. But for manufacturers, this is a possibility to acquire a product which is already on the design verification by us.
Thank you. Okay, we can move. Oh, there's another question.
Sorry, I can answer this. I will need the limitation and also all of the requirements within the essential requirements for US manufacturers in the basic operation. So that's part of it. There's something you are also talking about the obligations of manufacturers. This would be maybe a solution for us the operator to actually oblige your manufacturer with this certification.
Yeah, so the question was if we can consider the essential requirements for manufacturer and operator that are written in the basic regulation to to oblige the operator to give this data. So in reality, the European regulatory system is organized in a way that there is the regulation that is called basic regulation developed by the European Parliament, and then there are the implementing rule and delegated rule developed by the Commission, and this is Regulation 945 and 947 that detail the requirements for all the drone operation. So at the end, 945 and 947 are two regulations that detail how to fulfill the essential requirements of the basic regulation. So today, in reality, so if an operator wants to use a drone that developed by manufacturer, either the manufacturer provide this data to the operator, or the operator will use another drone where the manufacturer is willing to share this data. So then there will be then in the future some option to simplify, but at the end, the manufacturer has to provide this data, otherwise the operator will not be able to buy it. So as was said also by York, will be also a market consideration. The next question, if the operator guaranteed that the US will never go beyond the ground risk buffer, why such large adjacent area, minimum 3 minutes, full speed, with the same requirements, ground and air as the operational volume? Should it be less limitation as reaching that is an extremely remote consideration? I would like to start, then I will give it to you the floor because I'm sure that we can complement our. So what we said before is that first of all, we need to assess what is the risk of the adjacent area. And then the requirements that needs to be imposed on the drone are a function of the risk of the adjacent area plus the performance that the drone has demonstrated. I give you an example. So first of all, the size of the adjacent area, as I said before, the general approach is that the 3 minutes range is the main elements. Then you apply no more than 5, no less than 5, no more than 35 kilometers, you remember? But it's the 3 minutes because then is the time that the operator can take then action, or normally the drone then will crash. So there were some considerations about the 3 minutes. This identify what is the area that needs to be considered as adjacent area. Then the requirements comes from what kind of drone we are using. And we said that if you are using a drone that is self-ABS L6, self-ABS L6, the requirements for containment are always either low level of robustness or no requirement. Because the drone already demonstrated through the type certificate that has a reliability, as a probability of failure that will protect the adjacent area. If instead the drone is a lower cell 1, cell 2, cell 3, so there is no verification, we know today that drone fails. I think that all of you are experiencing some kind of crashes due to whatever technical failure, sometimes also loss of control of the drone. So it happens. So this means that we need to protect the area, and this is why we have the containment. So the containment depends on the level of reliability that the drone already demonstrated. I don't know if you want to complement.
Yeah, I want to compliment because I think I understand the question differently. Thank you, Carlos, for this question. I see that there is a misunderstanding in there. And if there's a misunderstanding, it probably, we have to take part of the blame because then we didn't explain it well enough in SORA 2.5. First of all, the requirements for the adjacent area are not the same. They're different. What we evaluate in the adjacent area is average population density, which is very different from maximum population density inside the operational volume. And at the same time, Why is it such a large area? Is this restricting the operation? The opposite is actually true. The larger this area becomes, the lower the average population density, the lower your containment requirements. So 3 minutes are your friend. Well, it depends on where you are. There are some exceptions to that, but we have looked at many examples, and the 3 minutes is basically a compromise. But if you try applying this, and this is really important, use real life examples. And when you come to the conclusion in this real life example, and use the 3 minutes and actually do the average population density, and they get an unrealistically high containment requirement, please let us know. But I will bet that this is not the case, because the dynamics of the new containment are very different than the old. This is, I think, if you prove me wrong, I'm actually going to be glad, because then we made a mistake. But right now, I think we did not make a mistake on this one. I think it's pretty good. But, go home and actually try real-life examples from your experience that gave you enhanced containment in the old SORA, and try again with the new one, and actually do your research what the average population density might be. It doesn't need to be an exact number. A rough number is good enough usually. And some qualitative elements I think are possible in here too, because usually we're so far away from the threshold that we're fine. Oh.
Thank you. Just to react on this question and on your answer, just please don't underestimate the risk of fire, because it's really important. We had several safety events with flyaways. Sometimes we didn't recover the drones, and we don't know what would have been the potential impact of fire. I think it's done by most people that we operate in France. We require FTS, independent FTS for PV considerations and improved useful. So let's keep in mind the safety aspect, and I agree with your answer, but we should not underestimate it anyway.
Thank you. So I'm not sure that this was heard on those that are online, so I would like to repeat, because I think it's also an important pledge, comment from DGSC, so the French authority, asking to the operator to don't underestimate the probability of flyaway, because this is something that is happening. There are also already some cases where there were some flyaways where the drone flew for some time with some kind of risk. So the containment is an important element. So we need to always to protect from the possibility that you lose control and the aircraft will reach an area where the risk is higher. So thank you very much, Nicola, for pointing this. Yep.
Thank you. Pedro was Beyond Vision. And I have two quick questions. The first one being if there are any plans to at least semi-automate the authorization requests by means, for example, of via web forms or something like that, because that would easy very much not only the submission but also the evaluation. And I think it would also contribute to the uniformization of the process. And my second question is, congratulations on the presentation yesterday in the afternoon. It was very important if you are willing to share the presentation with everybody.
Okay, so thank you. So I repeat the question for those that are online. So the question if we will have forms and material that will harmonize the way the application is done, and also the way what kind of documentation the operator needs to use in order to apply for an operation authorization. And then the second question was if the material will be the material that we presented so far will be made available. So first material, will be made available. Hopefully, so very soon, where we will publish on our website all the presentation that we presented yesterday, and also those that we are going to present today. So this will be done. Regarding that, so we today already we have the form for the application is already identified our MCAGM in our easy access rule, but also we upload it in the page of our specific category drone page on our website, so you can download all the forms in an editable way. Then, as we said, we are working on example of operation manual, and the Annex A of SORA also include an appendix where there is an example of form on how the SORA process can be documented and can be presented to the competent authority. So as soon as we are finalizing these documents, then we will make available also this, and together, as I said, with a possible example of operation manual for each PDRA. This is our goal. It will take some time. Will not be able by tomorrow, but so this will be our goal to do as soon as possible. There is another question in the front, please.
Hello.
Yeah.
My name is Prince University of Applied Science in Austria. And at first, also thank you very much for all the effort you put specifically also in the context of clarification of ground risk. I would like to have a comment on the granularity of ground risk. So this is a critical issue. Specifically, if you think of 1 square kilometer, this is pretty coarse. So specifically in transition areas here, you either underestimate or overestimate the risk. So I think it would be important also to look maybe a little bit closer, for example, to 250 or 100 meters might be here helpful. It is very important to have common validated data for performing this risk assessment. Means that the operator, so in case of law enforcement, processes actually are made on the same database here. And maybe the last comment, I also said Charles actually working worldwide. But I miss here was on the Europe on data. So we have here Europe Inspire, the infrastructure for spatial information in Europe, which means there's a complete legislation processes, data structures behind providing spatial information, and population is one of those. So maybe it can here just to use this form to provide this, which will be very, very helpful for our risk assessment in standardized way. Thank you.
Okay, so since we've asked you to repeat the questions, that was a lot of repetition. So your first comment was you think the grid size matters, and I fully agree with you. On ground risk, the grid size is a critical factor, and authorities have to converge on what the relevant grid size is. Because if you use this as a free parameter, you can tweak your population densities as you see fit. This becomes especially important now that we have actual numbers, not just at the back of the head, but actually on white paper. So there must be some, regulation, or at least some means of compliance that show this is the grid size you should use. And that, of course, depends on what data is actually available.
I can complement this one. So as I said yesterday, in our plan, there is the project to work with companies that have this population density data. And we would like to identify the minimum requirements. And one of the requirements will be this granularity, for sure, but with other requirements. So we will identify what we want what we think that should be provided at European level as a minimum requirement.
Then your second question, I don't fully remember, but I remember that I agreed with it.
you have the same set of planning, testing.
Yeah, that everyone uses the same data.
So-
That basically it is.
So still talking about the ground, so the population density, yeah. So this will still part of this other project that I was mentioning before. So there will be a service. So we will have the minimum requirements for a service, and then some service provider may provide this service, and naturally, so these minimum requirements we will agree with the authorities. So will be something that will be agreed by. So yes, with the authority. So then the authority would accept when this minimum level service has been provided.
Hello, David. Gareth, and the global question five on ground. Outside Europe, business and supervision authorities assess lives. When the ground is population density is unknown, the best target is also 2019. And there is no shoulder because the towns don't have formal buildings. How does moving emergency apply like that, please?
So I repeat the question, but then this is for Jarus. So the question is for when SORA 2.5 will become will be finalized, and then other part of the world will use it, and where there will be a little bit some area we can expect will be a little more difficult to identify maps with the correct population density, and then also the shelter factor in some area may be difficult to identify. So then how this SORA 2.5 may be used.
My comment is similar to what I said earlier. Even though we have now numbers on the paper, it doesn't mean that you cannot, apply them qualitatively. If you have really no idea what the order of magnitude is of your population density, then yes, you are in trouble, right? And especially when you want to do, I remember a discussion with you, David, if we want to do a mapping flight to find out how many people live there and have to know what the population density is before, that is kind of interesting. When it comes to shelter, yes, if your roof is not as rugged as the roofs around here, then probably the weight limit where you can apply shelter is lower. In the end, it doesn't matter how many numbers and guidance we put in the document, you cannot completely replace common sense when applying the regulation. So there's always special cases where it doesn't fit properly. Can the method still be used? Yes, I think so.
Okay, thank you. Next question.
Hi, good morning. I start from Regitech. So first, congratulate the whole team who has worked on the SORA 2.5. I really appreciate the work that is behind, and now I understand how the ground risk table was made. I really like the new scientific and quantitative approach. However, even if now it's much more objective, there are still some subjectivities that who is reading the requirements. I have two examples. What happens when my population density is 25,001? Should we, because of one person within 25,000, should we go to the next ground risk, or can we stay as long as we let's assume that we are at the limits of the size and the characteristic speed, so that we have no room to trade off. One of the requirements wrong is that if you have gathered 1 kilometer around 1,000 people, consider was that the ground risk went to 25,000 people. What is 1,000 people? Is it 20,000 clear, 15, 10,000?
Also in this case, I repeat the question, then I ask you to answer. So the question is that even if with SORA 2.5, we are moving to a more quantitative assessment, so but still there are some area where the subjectivity is still left. So there are some example like if the population density is slightly above the limits of the ground risk class, so how to handle, and there are in the containment, there is a requirement to assess if there is a gathering of people very close to the area. So there is it's written in the SORA 2.5, if it is about I think it's 25,000 people. This is the wording. So how this should be interpreted to reduce the level of ambiguity.
So if you do a measurement population density, your result is 25,001. I would suggest measure again. And I'll change the flight geography by 1 centimeter, whatever. The bottom line is, and it's a similar answer to what that I gave just to give to David. We cannot completely replace common sense, you know, and there is some subjectivity in it, and I think there's no way you can get rid of it. What I said earlier about quantitative method only means that you're making the wrong assumption. It's another point in the game, right? We will always have that, and that's why it is so important that educated people, both on the applicant side and on the authority side, have an educated discussion and basically agree on something. There's no other way.
Thank you.
Yes, on the population data. These are digital data which are exchanged.
Can you, since the comment, can you talk to yourself?
What an honor to speak in front of my former EASA logo. I would say on the population information presupposes an exchange of digital data between the originator and the end user. So this is a digital service. If there is a service, there is a service provider. Otherwise, the service cannot exist. For the service provider and the service provisions, normally we have two streams of requirements. One on the organization of the service provider, and one, the minimum functional and performance requirement for the service. For the service provider, I would plead EASA to consider that the requirements for the service provider are already published in ISO 23629-12. And in my humble personal opinion, is correct that this service is not in Regulation 664 because it's not safety critical. And the level of involvement of the authority based on the risk should be reduced because the risk of the authorities are limited. But it comes back through OZO 13 because the UIS operator has to demonstrate safety of external services. That's all. I would plead EASA to consider ISO 23629-12 for the 30 possible UTM service providers whose list is much longer than in 664. Thank you.
Thank you. We see that Filippo is a very fan of the ISO standard, and but we are. No, we you know that we have a project. So I said I think it is. I don't know if I said yesterday. So we have a project where we are evaluating all the standards that may be considered as accepted means of compliance, and ISO standard are also considered in this project. So by mid of this year, so by the summer, we should have the first set of list of standard that may be considered applicable to comply with the different SORA elements. And by next year, the project will deliver the second half. So possibly there will be some, or maybe some ISO standard. I have not checked yet. Yeah, before we go to the next question of the floor, just to at least some comments on
Yes, just one request, please, from the organizers. We continue to hear from our remotely connected audience that the audio quality is poor particularly on the handheld microphones, they cannot be heard by the several hundred people that are connected online. So I have two requests at this point. First, if you take the floor here in the room and want to come forward with a question, please only one question at a time, and allow us in the front then to repeat that question one to one so that our online audience can follow. Only one question, not a series of questions. And secondly, if by all means possible, depending on your location in the room, obviously, it is preferable if you come here in front and pose your questions in one of the microphones here, because those seem to work also quite well for the online audience. Thank you very much. Over to you, Lino.
Thank you. So let's read one question on the Slido, then we continue then the question on the floor. So quantitative population density sounds great for harmonization, but create problems in heavy density countries like the Netherlands, Belgium, and Malta, which increases the IGRC with 2 points. This means that operator cannot fly above populated areas anymore with SAIL 2. How to cope with that? I can start and I will give to you the floor. So I think that we all agree that what we are doing is try to identify the right level of protection based on population density. Then I guess even if you go in Finland and over Helsinki, there is a high population density, maybe then if you go outside of Helsinki, that will be lower. So this is a subject, is a quantitative and not subjective approach that should help you identify what is the actual population density. So that means some area of Central Europe may be very limited. You still may find the area with a lower population density. So I think it's the approach as that we are providing is to find the way to safely fly in areas to protect then the people that are on ground.
So, as we discussed yesterday already, because of the changed structure of 2.5, especially when it comes to M1 and the new shelter option, the resulting GRC comparing SORA 2 and 2.5 should in very most cases be identical and not differ by 2. It can differ by 1 if the population density exceeds 25,000 people per square kilometer. According to Wikipedia and the census 2019, the Maltese capital Valletta has a population density of 9,600 square kilometers. So if you want to fly over the capital of Malta, the GRC is the same as for SORA 2.
Thank you. So let's read another question. Why not exempt class UAS less than 100 grams from the IGRC determination table and automatically assign a ground risk class to this UAS? So like we did, I guess, for like you did for those below 250 grams.
I think that's an idea worth discussing, and the right course of action would be write a comment proposing that in the JARS consultation, and it's a discussion worth having, I'd say.
Thank you.
We're having similar discussions in EASA with as part of the airworthiness TAP task force, and I think it can be considered. I'm not saying it's going to happen. Please don't quote me, but at least the discussion is possible, and I think that would be a great comment.
Yeah, thank you. This was exactly my answer. Thank you. Good.
Good morning, everyone. Talking about first Naal Hassani from Daler, talking about the ground risk and the quantitative approach. So in the new SORA, we're talking about reducing the risk for people or the crash area. However, if the drone is, for example, equipped with a very slow descent parachute with a buzzer, is it validated now that the buzzer is considered a method for reducing the people at risk? Thank you.
The SORA doesn't really know the buzzer. Is the buzzer helpful? It can be helpful in certain situations at a slow descent. I agree with you. One could do an argument, and this is, I think, don't quote me, you could argue that maybe this is forms part of an M1 solution, that you have a buzzer when you do descend. But all in all, right now, as it is now, the SORA does not recognize the buzzer and doesn't know its existence. You can still negotiate with your authority if you may use it to get a certain safety benefit, or if you are a border case, like you cannot really, you almost fit into a category, say, then we add the buzzer, should that be good enough? But that depends on your authority and if they're willing to play or not.
And what also to complement, because it's an interesting also question. So SORA, as you may imagine, this is as we said before, is something that will be applied worldwide. So this means that it also needs to consider different kind of possible approaches. So the requirements are always at higher level. Then in each region, they need to identify procedures, acceptable means of compliance, acceptable standards. So this means that we then can identify for each of the mitigation and for each of the OZOs means of compliance, or in this standard that maybe will also include buzzer, for example. We can identify how to use buzzer, either as procedure or as example, in order to reduce the risk on the population that is under the operation. We have another question. Want to come here? Is the question? No. No. I think that was. Please. You want to come here?
Dominic Peters with Federation of Civil Drones. Small thoughts in between. We are always speaking about calculations and stuff. We had a fictional mission to do, and we spoke around the numbers, but we even forget that we can mitigate to choose our flight path. We use the Rhine, for example, and then are some emissions to the public. We have not the acceptance in the public about the noise. Another problem. So for me, it's always as an operator, also as the president, to have the acceptance enhanced to our actions throughout. It's nice to calculate, but we can mitigate also to make maybe a longer way with our aircrafts to protect the public. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the comment. So, we need to, we are all here to try to grow together. Important is that there are some new players now. So we used to work with aviation companies where in the last decades there was a safety culture that was growing, and now, especially in the last years, the safety culture, also with the new standard developed by CAO for the SMS, are growing. So now we need to also try to come to show to those that are new in this field how this safety culture is important to protect not only the people that are that may be put at risk, but then it's also need for continuing your business. Because otherwise, if there is any accident, there will be problems for everybody. If you want to come here.
So when we're talking safety, from an overhead, by the way, when we're talking safety and following up on occurrences, and there is the mandatory reporting, etc., is there any thought of integrating, let's say, unmanned into the aviation reporting, ACARS reporting, for example, which is now for manned aviation the case? Is there further thoughts about it?
Yeah, thank you. So we have a system to collect the occurrence reporting. What are occurrence reporting? Reporting are events that happen during the operation, events due to failure of the drone, due to some problem because of maybe the procedure was incorrect. So anytime there is an event for which a person is injured or another aircraft, another manned aircraft is involved, you know that you need to inform the competent authority. This is mandatory for all operation, all drone operation. But in addition, there is also a voluntary reporting that is something that is very much appreciated. So the ICAO safety management system is defining how an operator may demonstrate to have a safety culture, and safety culture demonstrate by identifying also other events that even if they were not causing an immediate threat at the time, but if repeated in the future, they may have they may cause some kind of threat. So also in that case, will be highly appreciated if these kind of events are recorded by the operator, are reported to the authority, and just with the mindset to fix to identify the cause and fix the procedures, or if it was a technical failure, to identify how we can improve the drone in order to have a higher safety level. Now, these events in the normal aviation system are reported through a database, to a website that is called ACARS, that is still not perfectly customized for drones. And we already identified how to improve it. So there was a working group that worked last year. And so there will be some improvements that will come into play in the next. I'm not sure then how long it will take. But so the new taxonomy, for example, has been identified and already has been agreed. So we can read the next question. The EU drone rules requires the operator to use a green flashing light for night operation. In addition, the SORA requires the operator to use navigation lights, which often are different from the standard lights on the EU way. How this is solved? Using external lights for small drones may shift the center of gravity or exceed the maximum takeoff mass. Yeah, so now, why we have the green flashing light? The green flashing light was required by the security authority because the security authority, they want to identify if they see during night some aircraft approaching. If this is a manned aircraft that is maybe very far, so but they see just the light, or if this is a drone that is very close, and then they need to do some actions. So we identified which was the lighting scheme that is not used in the manned aviation and still can be visible. So the green flashing light was the result, so that can clearly differentiate a drone from another aircraft. So this is why this was imposed in the open category, but not only. So there will be on all drone. So we know that SORA is not applicable for the open category, but for the specific category, yes, SORA is applicable. We are for lights, especially when you are flying with small drones at lower level, the navigation light and the other SORA requirements maybe may not be essential. But so at this moment is the competent authority that will assess case by case and will identify which of the SORA requirements can be alleviated. So we will continue in our discussion to identify some common rule to be provided to all authorities. Did I say well, Thomas? Because Thomas is our responsible for this activity.
Good morning. As usual, Lino, you hit the nail on the head. It was correct. But I may compliment in that sense that the SORA is being evaluated by EASA in order to accommodate all kinds of drones operations. So the first assessment we did was from the SORA perspective, more or less the easy exercise, which was assessing the SORA in order to accommodate manned VTOL capable aircraft operations, which are certified aircraft. So with the NPA published last year, we were proposing not too many changes, but the next task ahead of us, of this working group, is to assess the SARA once more, one by one, in order to accommodate specific drone operations. And that will be, I suppose, a challenge, because it's more than just the lighting. There are things like you have marshalling signals. What do you do with this? So we are working on this, but it will take some time.
Thank you. So another question, is there any data on the number of light and manner certificate each aviation authority has given out currently, and is this data accessible to the public? So every 6 months we conduct surveys with all the aviation authorities, so we collect also the data on how many light and manner certificate we have. This data is at this moment we are not publishing. I'm not sure if there is any. Maybe Sasha, you know, if this is a thing that we can make available, this data, on at least the number of how many LUC for each nation has been approved.
With pleasure. I think there's no secrecy behind that. The issue is that even us, we don't know fully. Because there's also no requirement on the member states to report the number of LUCs being issued nationally to EASA in something like real time. We do surveys, so we have a quite good picture. From that picture and from that survey, we can say that for now the number of LUCs being issued is handy, is overseeable, so it's not excessive. But we'll look into that and see what we can do here. I think there should be ways to make this data available at periodic intervals, at least, I would say. Thank you.
Okay. So it's 10. We may continue with our program, and then after there will be some additional time left, we can continue to answer to some questions. So the next topic is the operation manual. So Christopher Kram from LBA will provide us a presentation on the approach proposed by the German Aviation Authority. Thank you, Christopher.
Okay. Just type with the keys, right? So, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Christopher Kram from the German Civil Aviation Authority, formerly known as LBA. Just giving you a short introduction how we approached the operations manual. So perhaps you remember yesterday, EASA told you, well, it's quite simple. You just have to do 5 steps to get a drone in the air. Buy a drone, register yourself, do risk assessment, get an approval and fly. Yeah, but the main work is more or less in between, do the risk assessment and getting the approval. So, and it's mainly, you really have to write an operations manual. What we experienced in the ABA, that all the applicants really have some problems really to write this operations manual. So it was mainly down to, can they use the Annex A, which is proposed with the SORA, or the AMC1 of US Spec 30, and they more or less getting confused. And here I just want to highlight some items of it. It was more or less down to the structures, which have not been exhaustive to meet all the OZOs and the mitigations. The structures were not really scalable, and most applicants have a large amount of operational areas, different UAS, and so on. Furthermore, it was more or less how to move on with the operational manual. So how to transition perhaps to look, or how to transition further even to the certified category, because it's different between the Annex A or the manual which is proposed for the AOC. So what we more or less thought, well, let's give it a try and we write our own manual. So this is more or less what we did, and we need several approaches. It wasn't done at the first one, so we experienced the same one that most of you did. So what we came up with is this structure. So more or less, we separated into, I guess it's 7 parts and annexes. So the first one, part A, general information, part B, procedures, and then let's just skip to part D, training. So these ones are directly inspired by the 965/2012, which is AirOps. So perhaps just look at what has been established and just transfer it down to a specific category. Then we just added the other ones, which are directly adapted by the 947. So flight areas, ERP, technical, and maintenance. So this is nothing new. So key benefits of this one, first of all, it's modular, scalable, so you can just add more UAS, more areas, and so on. You can, what you see later on, you can transition to look using this kind of structure. And you can also, when you're using this structure for, let's say, a SAIL2 operation, you can simply extend it to a SAIL3, 4, 5, 6, and then perhaps even in the certified category. What was also the outcome of our work was that we got a complete cross-reference table to all the OZOs that are required by the SORA process. So it's more or less, now you get a link between each OZO and the direct chapter in our operations manual. And furthermore, we said, well, now we just get a cross-reference. Why don't we just write down some aid? So we do some formulation guidance on the procedure, what we think might be acceptable. So we ended up with the template for the operation manual that really includes all the required declarations and proposals or placeholders for the content. And this is what we supply to the applicants. So this is what we think is suitable to fulfill the OZOs. So as you can see, there you got the cross-reference table. Just to be a little more clear, this is more or less how it could look like. So you got the OZO, let's say, as an example, 8, 11, and 21, which are, of course, operational procedures. Where's the best place to link them? Well, of course, part B, procedures. Quite simple. But then you come up with the next one. Say, let's just skip to OZO 23, which is environmental conditions. So where would you link this one to? Perhaps an Annex A. It's hard to do. We just thought, well, we'd split up the OZO into the integrity and the assurance, and of course, into the different criteria that are recommended. And so we just attach these ones, each to one of the parts in our ops manual. So you get a clear idea where you can put in the procedure, how to do it. And for 23, it becomes a little bit more clear. So also 23 more or less affects part B, part C, training, and perhaps even some technical answer. But this is what we've done. So this is more or less our comprehensive safety portfolio that all of you need to do. So the OZOs are workable with, and you can transfer them in a quite good structure in the ops manual. So this is just an example, perhaps, of our B procedures of 2.5, 2.4. And in orange or yellow color, you can see the requirement from the OZOs. So it's a little bit more cryptic. You need to do some decoding, but it's quite obvious. So OZO 8, 11, 14, 21. Integrity criteria 1A. Quite easy. You can look it up. And then, of course, the other one is also 23. And then we just said also, this might be the procedure to fulfill this kind of OZOs. So it's up to the applicant, simply copy and paste. Of course, you need to adapt it a little bit because in the blue one, they get a special email address, but it won't fit all of you. So you just take it, adapt it a little bit, tailor it to your organization and your operation, and you're done. So this was more or less our approach on this one. And we provided this kind of template to all of our applicants. So it's freely available on our webpage. What was more or less the situation afterwards? The quality of all the applications significantly improved. So the structure was all the same. They know how to write the procedures. They know what we as an authority expected of the applicant to do, to fulfill. All the operations manuals look the same. So it was easy for us as an inspector just to evaluate, let's say, application 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on. Even for you, when you perhaps move from one country, company or organization to another, you will always find the same procedures at the same place in the manual. You don't require so much training. That's the same one that's done in the AOC or in the technical department. And what we also experienced, that by providing this kind of information, all the operators really adapted this template very quickly. And then, of course, the workload also massively decreased for the operators just to write the operations manual. That was a benefit for you. For us, we also get the benefits because more or less turnaround time to check a complete new operations manual for first-time applicant more or less reduced down to about 3 working days. Previously, perhaps something like 2 weeks or 1 full week, but now we're down to 3 days. So it's less, how to say, arguments for you to complain that the authority is not working quick enough. This was one of the items. And then you remember I said something with scalable structure. On the left, you've seen the blue stack, how our operations manual is looking like. And on the right side, this is more or less a glimpse into the future, how we think the look manual will look like. There you see, well, in the look manual, you got the part 1 general, then you get, of course, the SMS system as part 2, part 3 with privileges, and part 4 for annexes. And how to implement it? Well, quite simple. Just put it in. So you don't really need to change a lot. So general part 1, general remains the same. You just need to extend yours that you've written previously in the part A a little bit more, just to fulfill the whole OZO and a requirement on high level of robustness. Afterwards, you add safety management system, you add the description of the privileges, and all the blue stacks below are more or less the operational authorizations that you had previously. So you just need to can transfer them one by one. And there are only 2 blue stacks now, but you can add a 3rd one, 4th one, and so on. This might be the scalable structure of our project as well. That's so much for the structure and for the benefits of it. Now for you, how to access it? Well, quite simple. Go to the LBA's webpage. There you find the so-called German word Drohnen in the middle. Just hit it. Then you need to go down to which is called Betriebsgenehmigung, operational authorizations. And there you will find a link to the documents in English or German language. They are all publicly available. So this was more or less a short introduction how we approached really the issue with an operations manual and the requirement for the operators to write it. And this is more or less how we solved it. So feel free to access it. As you see, Word or PDF. The language choice is for you. And that's all so far.
Thank you. So this looks like is a very good example that we may use. And if you can go back to the structure, to the slide on the structure. So really, maybe the next one, because the one is showing how you can use a modular approach. So I think that this will help also when you want to, for example, you already have an authorization with a precise location to fly in area A, and then tomorrow you want to fly in area B, you can see that you have part C only to be updated. And so this means that also when you do a cross-border operation and you need to demonstrate to the competent authority of the operation that you are good to fly in the other location, then is part C what you need to provide to the competent authority of authorization. So really looks like it's a way that may facilitate the demonstration, both on the competent authority of registration and competent authority of operation in case of cross-border operation that you fulfill all the requirements. So what we may do now is as EASA, we will take these documents, we will do and in consultation with all the other national aviation authority, maybe we can find some improvement here and there. Maybe, then when this is shared by all the European Aviation Authority, we will then make available on the ASA website, and we will start then to develop example of operator manual for all the arrays. Maybe we can have, I don't know if it's feasible to have something that also for sale one for sale 1, for sale 2, or so on.
Yeah, so just keep in mind what we've done. The exercise is purely for sale 2 operations. So we don't apply any kind of M1 mitigation, no M2 application. ERP is on medium level of robustness, and ARC is directly ARC Bravo. So no changes. So, and then it's really up to you to add certain procedures to fulfill, let's say, the requirements of the mitigations. But this is just the first step. So our ops manual more or less fits, let's say, 80%. This is complete, and everything else needs to be inserted by you as an applicant.
Thank you. So is there any question? Yeah, we have a question. If you can come here, then will be easier for those online to hear your question.
First of all, thank you very much for your approach. I'm thinking it makes a lot of sense. Within our work, we have had contact with different CAAs, and they've all said that one of the struggles is the high differences in quality between very low or too complex for applicants, and reducing your workload will be beneficial for everyone. However, I still have a question, as we are both operators and manufacturers, and when we prepare our technical documentation, we tried to do it in such a way that it was both good for us and for our clients. We had contacts with different CAAs, whether it was in our operations or with our customers. And in the end, for a Sail 2 drone, we had 150 pages of a technical manual, 100 pages of maintenance manual, which tried to answer any questions we had in the past, plus respecting different standards, but in the end was maybe too complex. So, long story short, are you also planning to prepare a template for technical and maintenance manuals, mostly thought for manufacturers, even though it is in Sail 2 and the technical requirements are lower? Thank you.
I can just answer to it. So this one is just purely for Sail 2. So most of the technical requirements are mostly declarations. So it's not upon the authority to check it. Therefore, our template now consists of around about, let's say, 100 pages, not more. Of course, when you're expanding your operation into, say, 3, then you need to have more technical details into. We more or less also prepared a template for this one, but it's not published yet. And then, of course, the template grows a little bit more. So there you can also see, well, Sail 2, 100 pages, perhaps Sail 3 should be end up 180. I don't know it exactly, and so on and so on. But yes, there will be some further templates, but they are not ready yet at the moment.
Hi, my name is, sorry, Adriana G. from Austria. I have just a simple question. The language you are using is English, perfect. Is there any resistance? Is there any unwritten rules that the NAAs, German-speaking, French-speaking, whatever, will accept the English specifically for these manuals and so on? Because it can be a blocking point if you are going to apply to many documents needed from several projects or operations you are doing. Is that acceptable, or there are some resistance from NAA? It's probably a question for EASA and also for other guys. You have in German, in Austria have the same, but not 100%. French, all, they are more resistant to other languages. And Italians are more flexible. I have no problem with that. I know French, Italian, and German too. So, thank you.
No, thank you. So, no, now, then we go if you want to come here, then in the meantime, so I'm not aware, actually, I'm not aware of any resistance from authorities. So in Europe, we have the general principle that every European citizen should have the right to use their national language. So this means that if you apply in your nation, you may use your language. However, when you are flying then in other countries, it's not sure that then that language is understood. So we could not write in the regulation that English should be used because this is this principle. But I think that it's understood that if you want to fly outside of your country, you should use English. So, and then if there is some NAA that are not accepting this documentation in English, maybe we can try to facilitate if it's the case, but I'm not aware that this is today is happening. Maybe then we can check with both France and Germany if they accept.
Well, for me, I can only take for Germany. So as Natala said, well, we all know that English is the primary language for aviation. So of course we accept all applications also in English language. German, of course, every other ones we are struggling with. So please keep it to German and English.
Could you translate the question, please? So, no problem for France either. Thank you.
Thank you. That was brilliant. Please. Okay.
Yes, thank you. That was excellent. It's good to see the layout. Question to move from the IASA area now to the JARIS area with the Annex A training and usability group. Surely a layout like this would be valuable if we're getting good feedback from German experience. And also we now have they in the UK, that non-EU place, has a PDRA UK 01, which has got a particular layout as well. So I'm wondering where we can converge this experience.
The short answer, yes. Long answer, as some of you might be aware, we did the current template for the operations manual, or ConOps, the old language, of SORA is Annex A, and it is terribly outdated. The one that is officially available, and that's also part of the AMC material. What we did write a new Annex A, not tailoring it to one particular sale, but to cover all the sales and add more guidance and how to do a modularized manual as well. This was under consultation last year in the spring. We are still working on doing the comment resolution, but we had to scale back the priority a little bit because the publication of 2.5, the new main body, the new containment, had a higher priority. And we don't have endless human resources at JARIS. Sometimes it's the same people that have to do both. So we had to make some priorities. But work is picking up again on the Annex A. And with the experiences that a lot of the colleagues from the NAAs have, including my German colleagues, I think even improving the current Annex A draft even better to also reflect these ideas, which I personally like a lot. I think we can create a best of product for the upcoming Annex A so that we have both an Annex A that tries to cover all the sales and gives a lot of information how to properly modularize and structure your manual in general. And then we will, should have like good implementation examples, like the German Sale 2 example, and maybe we'll have Sale 4 example, and sometime in the future a Sale 3 example. But basically, if we all pull together, we can together get a really good product and ease the life of applicants because they are better know what is expected of them, what they need to write.
Då tar jag det här på svenska då. No, not Swedish in that case. Paul Carbonier, Air Forestry, Sweden. Coming to Part B procedures, the level of integrity, level of assurance is the highest for Sale 2 for specifically the operational procedures. And here we dictate that we should have 3 levels, normal and contingency and emergency. how would you different organizations see to that we go only to two, normal and non-normal, as the rest of the aviation world is working? Questions to both.
We have had many discussions on how many kinds of procedures there are and what they're called. And all the people with all these different opinions were all aviation professionals. So I'm a little bit reluctant to say what is right and what is wrong. Since we are making quite a distinction in the gyrosemantical model for the SORA between contingency procedures and emergency procedures, we kind of have to, separate this, because at least for some of the situations, particularly on containment, you have to, the authority has to check, look, what happens if you leave the flight geography? Do you have contingent procedures in place? Of course, it's a non-normal procedure, right? You could put them all together, but then they are handled slightly differently, slightly in the authorization process, because, we don't, approve the whole manual. Sometimes we just, want to see that you have a manual. Sometimes we only check the emergency procedures. If you do a huge air risk mitigation, we really thoroughly check the operation procedures for the airspace interaction with ATC. So it depends on the situation. When you go to SAIL 3, everything will be checked. But below that, it depends on, what the important pieces are. So it kind of makes sense, but I'm not going to fight a religious war over this. That's my position.
I just need to compliment Jörg. So what we did is also just look at what is really required at the moment for SAIL 2, and then we put everything in our manual. So we will definitely see, well, if contingency procedures are needed or not. You will really find it in our template at the moment. And everything that's in, from our point of view, would be acceptable if the applicant writes it this way.
Because there is I agree on the view of how you built the system. I like it very much. But there is a difference putting a pilot in a situation of deciding, am I in normal, contingency, or emergency procedures now? From past experience of seeing pilots work in the different configurations, so to say, it's easier to say, you just stepped out of the normal, do this now. And it's easy for you to react and relate to the situation. So it could be still the same structure, but for the single pilot going out of the normal, you're now in non-normal. Doesn't matter how we classify it for you as behavior.
But in the specific category, in the SORA, but the pilot doesn't know the difference between, am I still in contingency mode, or am I activating the emergency? Because if you're in the emergency, you also have to activate the emergency response plan. If you don't know when that is, then you're in trouble.
So I think we will take the last question and then we'll break, for coffee. Please.
So, the most burning question at home, I think the audience at home, there is only one question, which is burning. Does the LBA has a price tag?
What do you mean with price tag?
For the operation manual?
Simply no. As you've seen on the next slides, well, it's simply publicly available. We're free to download it.
No, I mean to the process. Till the end, yeah.
The application process, you mean fees and charges? Yeah. Yes, we have one. Of course, it can also be found on our website. So it's directly depending on the sale and the mitigations used. So we try to make it as objective as possible and not depending on really the work hours utilized for each application. So there you can just look it up, and it's a metrics, you can find it online.
Thank you for this very good example.
Welcome.
I appreciate it.
Okay, so I was expecting what was a bit longer, the question, the answer. Maybe you can take another one. So since we have 1 more minute, please.
Yeah, Michael again from UC Benelux. I think the example given or the template given is very good, but there is also one other question I think that will pop up with operators is, if you have made this or used this template, and actually it could also be valid today, and you have an operational authorization based on this, what is the level of changes that can be accepted by the authority without sending, again, an update of the ops manual? Because, for example, there is a firmware update, or there is another minor issue you want to update. So what is the level of changes accepted without sending the ops manual again to the authority?
Yeah, so this is defined by the level of robustness of the OZOs where the procedure is coming from. So I think that we already added in the Annex say that was under consultation from JARUS, that was there was the table of contents that were identifying from which OZOs was coming from and which level of robustness was coming from. So if the OZOs that is belonging to that procedures is a low level of robustness, means a declaration, so you can automatically modify without having any change. If it's said for high level of robustness, then you need to ask the authorization from the competent authority to review it. Now in the medium, I don't remember how we manage the medium level of robustness, because still you need to have data.
Well, in medium level robustness, the way it's usually handled is at evidence of the procedures must be available. The way it's usually handled is you put your procedures into the manual, and since you are submitting that for authorization anyway, they are obviously available, because if it has the chapters with the operation procedures, they're there. The real question in there was, but when did I make changes to a level that I have to resubmit my manual, that they put it on file? They don't have to reevaluate it, because the authority only needs to look for, is evidence available? Do they have a manual? If we have operation procedures for all situations, and if they are only updated, technically, the authority simply, okay, thanks for the update, we'll put it on your file, because there's nothing to really check. The question is, when do you have to do that? Because, you know, I'm sure that Christopher and his colleagues don't want to get, you know, new versions of the manual every 2 weeks, because, you know, you fixed minor issues. And to my knowledge, the classification to what is a minor, just a correction that where you don't need to notify the authority and for medium robustness, and when to do it is not set anywhere really. So this is probably a task that we need to think about how to define that.
Thank you.
I may offer a thought here that stems from the conventional manned aviation operations manual. And what I hear from here is that those principles are largely being reused. There is a chapter in OM Part A of every air operator, for example, that is called changes. And typically in here, this is exactly the place where it is described what is the scope of changes for which the air operator is authorized without reapproval, or we speak about direct and indirect approval procedures that are established here. Typically, then there is reference made to an annex, and that annex then lists those parts which require reapproval by the authority before the change can be enacted. And by conversion or conversely, anything that is not mentioned in that table is free to the operator to make changes, typically send an updated amendment to the authority, and if the authority doesn't object within a given time period, then it is considered approved. And that's what typically is understood as the indirect approval process. This works nicely to my understanding, and maybe can be reused also in the operations manual in the unmanned world. Thank you.
Okay, so we are going then to do some additional activity to better clarify this. So we can have a break. Then after break we'll continue. Before exiting, so we would like to have a group photo. So now we can go all together. Maybe we can fit in the foyer here, and then we can meet all of us just outside of the meeting room. that we have a group photo, and then the coffee is served in the same meeting where we were yesterday, I guess. Meeting room, yes. So see you at 11.
And you can also take in the ground. Yeah. Yeah. We'll actually just control it from here. And this is exactly what I am looking at online and you see the mic is always.
Well, I think.
Or, yeah. Because there will be then they come to the next goodness. I don't more.
Okay, so just I will say 3 minutes. Please look mouse. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, I kindly ask you to take place. So we are restarting, starting with the next topic in the agenda, that is the summary of changes of SORA 2.5. So yesterday, you got an overview of how SORA 2.5 is trying to solve the main elements of the main issue to identify in SORA 2.0. Now we have Andrea Perca from FOCA. She is the lead of the task force within the working group SRM of JARUS that was in charge to development of SORA 2.5. So we'll have a presentation, then we will answer to all the questions until 1300. I give the floor to Andrea. Thank you, Andrea.
Thank you, Natale. Hello, everybody. As Natale said, I have the pleasure to be part of this great exercise of doing the transition from the SORA 2.0 to SORA 2.5. So I work for the Swiss Federal Office of Civil Aviation. And in that role, we are supporting JARUS and the SORA main body task force. So this is one of the groups that is active in this exercise. Well, this presentation is meant as a summary of changes. So a lot of the things that you will see on the slides, we have already discussed, and I would say quite intensively during yesterday. So through some of them, I'll just skip quite rapidly. To some of them, I'll stay a bit longer just to deep dive into some things that maybe were not addressed. So maybe a first word of just a slight description of how this whole exercise went. One of the beauties, I believe, of the work that we have to do, and when I say we, it includes you as well, it's reaching consensus. The working group, so I'm here to present it, but it's actually the work of a group behind, has worked sometimes at crazy hours for some of us with intense discussions. But I think we managed to come to this point where somehow the ball is now on your side. So please provide your comments, please provide your inputs, because we are still in the process. So the SORA 2.5 is not yet finished. It's a work in progress. So every comment, as it was said also yesterday, to improve the outcome of this work. So with this in mind, whenever we say SORA, we mean a package. So it's actually a set of documents. In the center of it, it's the main body, it's the starting point. And around it are the documents that support different parts that are related to the methodology. So I would say the main body is the starting point, because once you deep dive into it, you get directed to different annexes as they are related to the ground risk, to the air risk, and so on. So that should be somehow the help. The presentation today is structured along this view, that how you open the comments, so the package that was sent for the external consultation, you will get confronted with the changes as we go along the presentation. So the 2.5. when we said the 2.5, it means we actually did not touch all the annexes. So the ones marked in green on the slides are the ones that have actually had changes to them in the consultation, with a slight remark on Annex A, because Annex A has been already externally consulted. So at the moment, you will get the main body, which now contains also the executive summary inside the document. So it's not anymore an external document. Annex B, Annex E, now the Annex F, which is a new part of the package, and the update to the Annex I. Going one by one in the document. So the main body was done of a subgroup in the group. So we split the teams so that we can focus in smaller groups into doing this update. It was done under the co-leadership from myself with Tony Nannini. And as I mentioned before, one of the first changes that you will notice is the fact that the executive summary is now part of the document. It has some explanatory parts on the SORA approach. It also introduces the target level of safety, as well as the SORA steps. So it's the entry point in the documentation. Another element that you'll notice is in the applicability. So as we are, the SORA, it's a living document. It's being constantly updated. And in this exercise of getting it more and more mature, we had also last year, I believe it was the Cyber Annex, which is an annex to an annex, so the Annex E. And it addresses the threats that may have an impact on safety. Now, when you see this reference, don't get confused by it. The Cyber Annex, as I mentioned before, it was separate, so it's part of a separate consultation that took place by JARUS in the past. But then once you get confronted with it, the comments somehow are not expected to that specific document. As well, then the Annex H, which is a work in progress. It is expected soon to be also out for your review. We did not include a reference to that at this point, just because it's not yet a formal document. The semantic model, I think this is one of the parts we discussed quite intensely these last days. You know the diagram on the left, so it's part of the 2.0. In the 2.5, we went together with the Annex A update and tried to improve that from a readability perspective and trying to ease the understanding as going through, with one element actually going out, and that being the optional air risk buffer. This diagram goes hand in hand with the next one, which you already seen as well, where the optional air risk buffer has been removed and the diagram slightly updated. The process outline, this has changed as well. And we had, I would say, we debated a lot around this one. I probably will repeat this often in my presentation, but please provide comments to all of these elements, because the intent of the swap was to make the reading and your creation of the documentation much easier and much straightforward. Meaning, before reaching the containment part, that you don't have to go through all the OZO list, like it was the case in the SORA 2.0. So now the two have changed places. First, it's the air risk, the ground risk, air risk, and so on. Containment becomes now the step 8, and and then the step 9, it's the OZOs, so the safety objectives. But the diagram looks the same, so it should look familiar to all of you. Something new we added in the SORA 2.5 are the SORA phases. Now, they are called phases because they are intended towards the interaction between the regulator and the applicants in order how to make this process much more smooth. So we used to have cases where an applicant had to go through the whole exercise of creating the documentation, of putting together a lot of text, then coming to the regulator, and then in that conversation, maybe, for example, the sale was not agreed, which meant most probably a lot of effort on the applicant side to have to update that part, to have to go again and again through the documentation. So in order to avoid that, the SORA phases are intended to transmit the message that first, in the initial step, in the first step, let's first agree on the sale. So the applicant comes with an initial set of documents which describe the operation in big terms. What is it about? How is it going to look like? And try to reach a first level of agreement with the regulator if the sale is actually the right one for the operation. If that's the case, then, the sale and the containment part, because they are very closely related. If that is the case, and the preliminary agreement has been given by the competent authority, the operational safety objectives are being developed, and then at the end, in the whole set of the package, so the comprehensive safety portfolio, results at the end. Step one, the discussion again about the CONOPS or the operator manual has been mentioned, so this will change. This will change also together with the Annex A. But the intent behind it is kind of show you what is expected at the end of the whole process. So you will see the connection between the step 1 and the step 10. They use more or less the same words so that they are very closely related and they come through. So what you need at the end is to have the operator manual, the compliance evidence, and the SORA safety case. And in this first step, they are introduced, so you are aware of them, but they are not expected to be directly created. This is actually the output of the whole process of the SORA that you will go through. Which gets us to step 2, the ground risk process with the new table, the quantitative table, and the mapping between the two. So the issue of data availability is clear to most of us. Struggle to kind of find the right way to cope and to use what we have. But then the mapping between the two is done. It's also available in the SORA itself. And this is the proposed table, how to see the qualitative terms and the quantitative terms in the same view. The back analysis of the table that we have in the main body is the Annex F. So here is the theoretical basis from the ground risk classification. And here are the details and the whole model that is behind those numbers that justify why those numbers look the way they do. Normally, you should not be required to consult Annex F. So I know when opening Annex F, it might be a bit overwhelming sometimes because of all the diagrams and the formulas, and might transmit the feeling that we all need to get a PhD to go through it, but that's not the intent. So it's an incredibly useful tool when you want to go beyond the main body. So when the elements that are there, somehow you believe it doesn't fit your operation, and your actual details of what you want to do is different than how the general pattern provides it, then please go there, try to use it. It looks more complicated than it is. So I think the group who did a tremendous job in putting that information in a most comprehensive way possible so that it eases your work and you can make the most use out of it. In the step 2 now, you will see a new chapter which relates with the adjacent area. Now, for the exact place in the main body, I think we still have open discussions if this belongs here or we should move it into another step of the SORA. But the reason why you find it in the step 2 is that you use the same table for the determination of the GRC. For the ground risk, the same table is being used for the adjacent area. So that's why at this point, the exact determination of the size and the intrinsic GRC comes in the document. So we discussed the distances and the rationale behind them. So I will skip through this part. But the main point is at the end of the step, at the end of the step 2, there should be clear what is the GRC of your flight and what is the GRC of the adjacent area. Which gets us to step 3 and the related mitigation behind it. So the table changed as well. And this is the rationale behind was the Annex F and this move from qualitative to quantitative. And as you see on the right side, Now we have a M1A and B. M1A and B follow the same intent behind them, and the M2 for the effects of the impact dynamics. A similar approach for the adjacent area, mitigations to be used. Now here, it will be a matter of discussions which one they apply and which one will not apply, given the expectations on the system that are still able to function or not once the drone enters this flyaway situation. I think it's a matter of case-by-case basis. We need to have a better understanding of all the mitigations and what each individual system is able to do. So that's why also the text, so in green, you see always the text that it's copied from the version 2.5, is that justification may be provided for additional mitigation if you think that they are applicable in your case. So it's not a list for one size fits all. When we leave the step 3, we arrive to the step 4. The air risk process, it's the same diagram, so it did not change. And Jörg will tell you a little bit more afterwards about this as a future step, because we are not yet done for the SORA in general. There are here and there, and you will see marked in the documents, here and there some text updates for clarifications. Together with the air risk comes also the adjacent side. So as you see, the adjacent area is now kind of split along the document. So you will find different blocks of text in different chapters that will lead you through the whole assessment at the end. Again, the vertical limits and the minimum altitude that is being included in the text. One change which is included, and you will see it as a new paragraph. So it's still part of the step 5. So we don't talk necessarily about the adjacent area now, but about the air risk. There is a new point D, which says that the strategic mitigation by operational limitations, so when we talk about a boundary limitation or a chronology limitation, may be used to reduce the air risk by 1 class in the case of VLOS operation with a considerably low time of exposure. This has been the result of long discussions, how suitable it's the current model for such operations which have a considerably low time of exposure. And we concluded to the text that you see on the screen. Now, it's worth making the comment that considerably it's up to a lot of interpretation. So here, once again, we come to this point where it's necessary to have this communication between the authority and the operator to find the common sense and what makes actually the most sense in a given situation. This information will be reflected in the later version of Annex C, so it's not in isolation. A lot of effort is being put into keeping the SORA package as consistent as possible. So if you ever spot some inconsistency, please raise them during the consultation. It will help us a lot. So then the change that I already mentioned before, after we went to the ground risk, air risk, mitigations, we come to the containment, then we come to this part. So the main philosophy was first containment, then the OZOs. That's why the step 8 becomes now the identification of containment requirements, which gives us 3 tables. So on the left side is the adjacent area final GRC that you already would have from step 2. On the right side top, it's the adjacent airspace, and then the containment requirements coming from the combination between the 2. Now, here in the main body, because it's this high-level document, you identify which are the requirements, and then the Annex E is the one that tells actually the technical aspects behind that. Step 9 is now proposed to be the new OZO, and also here the table has had some updates, mostly intended for better usability. So on one side, you will see in the text itself, there are some small words updates. The intent, as Natalia mentioned yesterday, the intent was not to change them. So there is no fundamental conceptual change in the OZO itself from their intent. However, there is text adaptation and there are new elements coming in like the flight-based method and some other aspects. In the main body, and this is only in the main body, we have the mapping between the new OZOs and the old OZOs. We are slightly concerned that this might cause some confusion when it comes to cross-references and other documents that are being created. If you see some big issues, please let us know. The rationale behind was that probably if we do such a change, it's better to do it rather soon before more and more documents are being created. And hopefully the mapping helps not to have any breach or risk of high misunderstandings. Together with the sales being, so the new ones, the old ones, they have been compacted. So we don't have any more, as you are familiar with some OZOs being the same, but having just several numbers associated to them. And the order has been also changed in order to help the Annex A mapping. On the right side, it's the further hopeful help that shows you who is the entity responsible. So it's either the operator, the training organization, or the manufacturer. Which gets us to step 10, which hopefully, again, it's a helpful, a happy one, because everything is done and will help get further into obtaining an operational approval. The link to the step 1 is added. So the 3 elements that were mentioned before are again here to show the connection. And there's also a paragraph which adds the link to the external services. So in the future, the intent is to map this also to the Annex H. So we have a clearer mapping, but the service level agreement is introduced here as well. One of the cherries on top, I would call it, of this update of the SORA main body is a proposal that you will see in the document set that is part of the external consultation. It's a proposal to restructure the document. So now the way the document goes through all the steps, it remains conceptually the same. So you will still have the steps of the SORA. However, the way the text is written and the way the intent behind those words is presented is slightly changed. And here is an example. So there will be the section heading, and then immediately afterwards, a guidance or an introduction, which should explain what is meant behind that. So what is actually the intent of this step. Then a task description, which it's presented in a clear terms like provide a brief description or it identify the type of operation. So clear actions in terms of what is expected to be done at this step, following by an outcome. What should come out of it? It's an analysis, it's a document, a description, or a familiarization with the document and so on. At the end, additional guidance in case we need to deep dive slightly more into a given topic. And this sums up the main body. So the group did not go into actually restructuring the whole main body at this point. So it's just a section, which you have as an example. And we are counting on your comments. So if the feedback is positive, the intent is to go and actually do the main body in that format. So once again, I said in the beginning, I will repeat this a lot. Please tell us what you think about it so we can properly address the future version. Now, wrapping up the main body, we go to the Annex B. This was done under the lead of Henry Hotari. And this Annex B, we tried to make it somehow to mark the changes, but we realized it's going to just look in a one color, a totally new color at the end. So that's why it doesn't have these guidelines in terms of what was changed, because it was considerably restructured in order to show the new mitigations. M1 criteria has been merged into one column. Now, it was also the intent to show in a better term the philosophy behind that 1 point of reduction means a demonstration of 1 order of magnitude behind it, so the reduction of population at risk. The M1B has been introduced for the VLOS, since now we don't have VLOS, BVLOS differentiation as we have in the 2.0. And then also in the M2, the link between the main body the Annex B and the Annex F has been introduced. So you can follow it easy. And if you would like to go deeper into the Annex F, you could kind of follow this red line. And the M3 has been removed. So now you will see it in the Annex E. There is still a paragraph saying that in some cases might be possible, but the reduction due to the ERP is seen as rather an exception. Annex E. So the integrity and assurance level for the operational safety objectives. I think I made a mistake here because Alexandra Florin is not from FOCA, but from Wings. So I need to update this. My bad. And also the Annex F had considerable updates into it, meaning all the changes that I mentioned before for the table of the main body, you will see them with a lot of content in the Annex E. The possibility to use a functional test-based method to qualify the UA or procedures was added. This is spread across several OZOs. So you will see where this makes sense. It's marked in the document. The new OZO, so the OZO Roman 4, which used to be the OZO 8, so the one for the procedures, has now a new criteria for the ERP. Because we took it out, so we took it out from the M3, it's now part of the Annex C, so it has to include these updates that are relevant for your procedures. And the new chapter is dedicated to the containment requirements. Now, Annex I, under the lead of Natale, not from FOCA, from EASA. This came hand in hand with the rest, because now we need to have the glossary of terms also hand in hand with the rest of the documentation. A new chapter in terms of a list of abbreviation has been added. This we did not have it in the SORA 2.0. And then some of the terms that you will see in Annex C, you may not find them in the rest of the documents. They were meant to provide this more clarity and support, sometimes understanding the intent behind those terms. This concludes my presentation for the package. You have also the link for the consultation. The work is not finished, as I mentioned before. On one side, we have the consultation going for about 1 month more, and then there are also further steps to be done. So before I pass the word to Jörg, are there any questions at this point? Not? Oh, yes. Would you like to come here? I thought, so since you have the slides on the 3.0, to wrap up.
Short confusion. Now, the way forward. Since 2.5, well, although 2.5 is still a lot of work, you know, and I'm quite sure that with the good experts from NAAs and some industry experts, we are going to be able to finish the release version of SORA 2.5 after the consultation this year. And this is the exact right time to plan the next steps. What becomes after SORA 2.5? Because a lot of these activities need to start now. We've had already some discussions with the leadership team of the workgroup SRM. And the current idea of what is the next step is the following. For the upcoming SORA 3, don't ask me for a release date just yet. We will focus on a more accurate ARIS model, enabling better airspace integration. And you remember my dinosaur comment of yesterday? It is simply too old. It does not reflect the new realities of uspace in UTM, new services that are available. Even older services like the land servers in the United States is not really reflected very well. And these things need to be considered when putting together these new annexes C and D. And also, we've had a lot of questions like, where's Annex G? You know, it's in the table of contents. Why don't I have it? Why can't I download it anywhere? And the reason is that Annex G is basically the analog annex to Annex F, but explaining the ARIS model. We have a draft of it. We're not 100% happy with it. And since we're going to touch the air risk model anyway, there's no point finishing the old Annex G. It's much more economical simply to use the current draft of Annex G and build upon that, making the necessary changes and updated it to our today's reality. What also will continue are further improvements in usability in all areas, because a lot of the changes in SORA 2.5 are based on field experience from those nations that have already used the SORA in the last 2 years. Of course, a lot of experience from Europe, but also from Australia and Canada were used to shape the 2.5. I think there's also the opportunity to add more guidance material, because even though we have the SORA, some requirements of it are still subject to interpretation by the authorities that use it. And if you remember my vision that for the role of SORA, I will press close. I have to hurry up. And in Europe, we're already seeing that for instance, the discussions we had on the M2 means of compliance, when do you satisfactorily comply with the requirements? I mean, this is not European specific. Things like that should be discussed on a wider scale. So once we have finished that, we should propose this to the other SORA user countries. Like, how about this? Should we add this as well? So more guidance material to some of the requirements in the SORA could be added. But I stress again, based on actual field experience. So if you find things that even 2.5 are not satisfactory, or when you're trying to apply it, you see inconsistencies or things that are difficult to apply, somehow get the message to us, and we will consider this in the next revision. Something we discussed, for instance, is what is really difficult to understand in the SORA is that it is basically, if you look at the flow diagram, it's like an endless circle, right? It has to converge. What you do in practice is you do a pre-application, and then you basically, we would have to change that. But doing that, we tried that in a quick fix when we had a meeting last year. We realized when we want to do this, it's not a quick fix because so many things have to be touched that it will basically blow apart. But those are the things we are discussing on how we could even improve usability on top of what we've already done. The next thing was mentioned before, the new Annex J notes to aviation authorities. And again, this should be based on field experience and on the requirements of the authorities. So an annex purely catered to the aviation authorities that helps us in the international standardization of the SORA and the application of the SORA. So basically, we should make it easier for the nations that already use the SORA, but as well as for those nations that are interested in using the SORA in the future in their regulatory framework. We believe it makes sense to write this annex, because right now it's just a headline and an empty Word document. And I'm currently trying to put together a team that could work on that. So this is still a fairly beginning of the process. And also we've decided we worked on some training material within the work group before, but we decided that all future training material that we produce should cater to support authorities in the process of the adaptation. Not the ones that already use it. They don't need this kind of training. They already they know it better already. But I think it makes sense that we direct some of our resources towards helping those who are interested. If you think this list is incomplete and there should be more things that we should consider in the future steps for SORA, please let me know. We are really happy to have any feedback that's not part of the consultation. Just directly email me. Why don't you do that in the future? That would be really helpful. And last but not least, that's the same slide I showed yesterday, so I'm not going to talk over this. Keep in mind that there are differences between the EASA adaptation of the gyro SORA. So don't make in the consultation, please don't make references to specific European implementations, because it does not matter for the gyros document. When the release is finished, I'm sure that Lino and his team will take the new JARA SORA 2.5 and replace all the things where EASA used to be in the SORA 2.0 in the AMC and basically adapt it again as they did before. Thank you so much.
So thank you. So with this session was supposed to wrap up all the elements that are needed for you to provide now comments that are more focused and really to identify what could be the real area of improvement. So now I think that you could have a better understanding on the connection between SORA 2.0, SORA 2.5, what are the improvement, why some decisions were taken. So really now we are looking forward for your comments. So we decided to keep some time left to now all the questions. So we'll continue until 1300 to answer to the question here on the floor and also on the that are on Slido. So I see that there is a first question from Filippo.
Yes, thanks. Congratulations to you and Jörg for the organization shot and everyone in the team for the organization short of this workshop. I have just one last short and easy question for Jörg. Where is the annex on cybersecurity in SORA? I have lost a little bit track. You mentioned several annexes. Yes. But we had worked with Andy Turling for an annex on cybersecurity. And in this moment, I am not clear in my poor mind where it does fit. Can you clarify?
Yes. I can happily clarify. The Cyber Annex is a supplement to the existing Annex E. There has been an active discussion whether this should be completely integrated, but integrating the Cyber Annex would create quite some ripple effects and will require extra time. The question is, should we include the Cyber Annex in trying to make it part of the updated Annex E, or do we keep them separate for now? And since we know that we are planning a version 3 already, should we add that later? For instance, in Europe, I think the Cyber Annex is not part of the AMC today. I just learned from you, Lino, that you might want to adopt the Cyber Annex as well in the future. But right now, Cyber Annex is just a proposal by JARS that, to my knowledge, has not been adopted by any member nation yet.
Yeah, so to confirm, so we were involved as EASA on the comment and resolution of comments that was provided to JARUS. So we made sure that also the European community comments were properly addressed. So and so we were satisfied with the way they were addressed. And I think that HRD, you know, if HRD was published with the comments. Yeah, I think if I remember. Yeah. So we make sure that also the CRD will be published. So then means that the JARUS process for commenting is equivalent to our European process. Then you can see what were your comments, how they were disposed. So this means that we are going to integrate. In our wishing list is that the annex, the Cyber Annex will be fully integrated with the current annex. So it will not be a separate annex. We need to see how challenging it is. If I don't know if we can fit in SORA 2.5, I have some doubt. Yeah. So maybe at this moment we'll keep as it is as a, I don't know, second part, Annex EB, for example, you know. So, but will be published as well. Okay. So we can check some question from Slido. I think we have quite a large number of questions. So the first one, will be mandatory for NAA to provide the feedback at the end of phase 1? How long a new OS operator will wait for NAA's feedback before finalizing process with phase 2? So I think that the phased approach, I will start, and I think better that also Asena you can answer. I think that the phased approach is a suggestion that we provide, is how to smooth the process. But then there will be several reasons why there could be different times. Maybe you can complement.
So the phase approach came as a lesson learned from from the experience of several authorities and operators. The idea behind this is to kind of encourage the stepwise approach. We agree first on an element, so the sale, containment, and then we continue to create the rest of documentation. However, it is not a mandatory requirement. So it will be up to each authority to decide how they organize internally, the way they handle the requests. And as well, the timing related to that, it's quite difficult to give a default. I believe I can speak also for the other colleagues from the authorities in the room. It will always matter in terms of resources, in terms of amount of requests that are being at the table, on the table at that given time. So it's impossible at the moment to give a specific time. What I can say as well is that we try our best to be fast, and all these elements like the operator manual that was presented before, and the SORA update now are intended to speed up this process.
So thank you. So you may see that on Slido, we are starting to select those questions that more on the topic between SORA 2.0 and 2.5, but later we are going to address also the other one, just to continue with this discussion, but we will address also the other one. So next question, I understand that in contrast to SORA 2.0, the SORA 2.5 IGRC classification does not separate VLOS and BVLOS operation, but only sites of drone and people density. Is that correct?
It's almost correct because there's a speed limit as well for the categories, which replaces the kinetic energy threshold that we used to have, but speed limit is easier to handle.
Okay, thank you. So straightforward answer. Do we have more on SORA 2.0? Yeah. I see. Okay, so when the adjacent area includes airspace below the operational volume, how do the new containment requirements apply? Immediate end of flight upon exit of the operational volume may not be appropriate. So I think that's
There's something odd here. I'm trying to wrap my head around this because this is not possible. Because if you have operational volume and some airspace below it that's not part of the operational volume, for the area to be considered, the footprint, you need to consider the area below it anyway. So I don't understand the question.
So I think that's what it was mentioning. So we showed that in the new pitch that we have in SORA 2.5 that you can have the operational volume with a lower limit. So this means that then the lower between the lower limit and the ground, this will be part of the adjacent volume. So then if you are going to for some reason terminate the flight, this may increase the risk of the adjacent volume below, because then the aircraft will crash.
No.
I think that this is what
Nino, I think it's a weird question because it is a hypothetical construct. But if you follow the instructions correctly, you cannot have any holes in the area that you overfly. The area is always, and the GRC block always has to extend beyond any volume above. There's no other way. Therefore, this does not really work. Okay.
Can you come here?
Sure.
If it's possible.
It's not meant as a hypothetical question. It's like Natale said, if you have the operational volume above some manned aviation airspace, yes, and you only have the requirements from the adjacent area part, the containment part, to follow.
This is what we are talking about.
Risk for the manned aviation below you, because once you leave your operational volume below, you have to use your flight termination system and you just fall down the airspace. Do you understand?
Yes, I understand it now. And Joanna, since we discussed yesterday that you should join the JARIS team, now I know who can fix this problem. No, on a serious note, yes, I think this is a valid comment, and that's again one of the reasons why we do the consultation. I think this needs to be addressed. Now I understand it. Yes.
Excellent, thank you. So, question? Yeah, please.
So question on the M2 mitigation. So on page 50 of Annex F, it describes that any M2 mitigation should not induce new failures. So one thing that we're seeing with the user manuals, especially for like retrofit, DJI, Autel type products, is limited payload capacity for additional weights. And sometimes manufacturers are putting in numbers to either qualify for open category or just limited. But we're noticing that certain civil aviation authorities, such as in France, they're approving parachutes being added that exceed the maximum takeoff weight of the manufacturer. Is there any clarity in the documentation on how to approach that? It seems some countries, again, France, Canada, allow for the modifier to declare above the maximum takeoff weight. But in other countries, if the manufacturer doesn't say that you're allowed to go beyond 4 kg, you just can't. So is there any clarity on that item on whose maximum takeoff weight is the trusted source? And if it's allowed to be the modifier, is there methodologies to justify that?
I think that we have several experts here.
I would give it a first shot. What I'm thinking about is the future side for JARIS is that's exactly the kind of guidance material that is missing, because what happens if those requirements are interpreted differently? So in the future, we should add that. Change of hats. In Europe, we're already working on better means of compliance document that we're going to discuss with industry 2 weeks from now, right? And I think that is the right question for that group, that this particular case might be added to the upcoming guidance material of EASA.
Yeah, I confirm that. So there will be this event in 2 weeks, and then this could be a good, the right moment where we can have this discussion. Okay, please.
I think yesterday you said about functional based testing that it was only applicable up to Sale 3, but in Annex E, it seems that it's allowed up to Sale 4, including Sale 4, if you apply the 30,000 cycles. So just clarify which is the true, or if there is some misunderstanding on my side.
The very simplistic answer is, of course, you can do that and fly the 30,000 hours if you can afford them. It's more on a practical note. I personally also don't believe that anyone would do that to fly 30,000 hours instead of simply complying with the design requirements of Sale 4.
Yes, a follow-up question. So as a follow-up to that is, would you accept accelerated life testing as a means of compliance for individual items to prove that they can survive 30,000 cycles after the gases?
I'm sorry, but at this moment I don't see anymore in the room the expert on from the House Certification Directorate. So this is something that I'm unable to answer at this moment. I know that we have the same concern that was provided by York, that 30,000 flight hour, yeah, it's quite large. Then how we can accelerate, and if it's something that we can be discussed, yeah, with them, but I cannot provide an answer.
On test-based approvals. In the United States, the FAA decided to do the DNR, to use the DNR process for their certificates of airworthiness. So when you do get a TC for a drone from the for a similar flight that would be Cell 3 in Europe, the process is actually pretty much the same. The problem of this methodology, and the Americans only do it that way. You can only fly 3,000 or 30,000 hours to get, obtain approval, depending on where you want to fly. And they don't have the alternative that we provide in the SORA with the OSOs. Okay, simply follow these design principles and have evidence available, and then you're good. There's an advantage to the test-based methods. Let's stick to the SAIL 3 example, 3,000 flight hours to show compliance. When you are a large operator/manufacturer, so the manufacturer operates their own drones, and you operate a big fleet under SAIL 2, and basically you can do a design freeze and a manual freeze and use this configuration and fly with several drones in while they're actually making money, and simply document 3,000 hours of flight without any incidents and use that as evidence. This might make economical sense. The disadvantage is, in the drone community, our manufacturers like to innovate a lot and make changes to the drone. This quick change to the drone is not really compatible with the test-based method, which means basically you have to basically start from zero, practically speaking. So if you are in the situation that you have a large fleet of drones and you constantly update them, you can do the updates on your SAIL 2 part of the fleet and start the clock again, while the ones that have the SAIL 3 approval with 3,000 documented hours basically have to have design freeze and operational manual freeze for this type of operation. If you can set this up, you can make this work. If you are a manufacturer that does not do that, then it is probably more economical to simply design the drones to the requirements of a SAIL 3.
Okay, so our expert on certification came back. So now you can answer the question without asking what is the question. Exactly, I will be on the spot. Okay. No, the question was on the functional test-based approach.
Yes.
So in the SORA 2.5 is written that it's possible until SAIL 4, while instead our means of compliance is only for SAIL 3. So this was if EASA believes that can be extended to SAIL 4, and then considering that in SAIL 4 we are asking for a large number of flight hours, 30,000, if there will be any kind of procedure that can provide some flexibility to accelerate the test and reduce the number of hours.
Okay, I understand. Yes, true that the functional test-based means of compliance is limited to SAIL 3. When we elaborated it, we went through many comments internally in EASA, then the SAIL 4 was not even considered practical. I know the SORA allows it, but so the SORA allows it, but personally, I could comment that it is not realistic. Personally. Now, if the question is there are methods to decrease this number of hours, even looking in the functional test-based means of compliance for SAIL 3, there are methods. It is possible to, when one defines the program of the test and provide as a proposal to the National Aviation Authority, to the authority or to EASA, to, for example, propose that some of the tests, some specific tests, for some it's possible, for others not, to be carried out on ground or partly in laboratory. And then it is also possible, if the configuration is consistently the same and there is recording of past flights carried out with that configuration, which had a positive outcome in terms of no loss of controls, to argue, to claim that those flight hours should be taken into account. So, for example, if 500 hours were already carried out positively with that configuration or a configuration that can be considered applicable, even with some minor differences, then those 3,000 flight hours of the sail 3, to make the example of the sail 3, could begin to go down to 2,500 in this simple example. And then others could be claimed with the reasoning I mentioned before for ground and flight. But it is a discussion, a proposal to the authority, and a discussion. As a matter of fact, with this methodology, a lot of, let's say, interaction with the authority would occur at the moment in which the demonstration test plan is provided, discussed, and agreed. And then it can be mostly the applicant to carry out the test and eventually taking the evidence to the authority. So what I'm saying is the involvement of the authority could be very much in the first phase of agreement of the total number of flight hours and how they are performed, and then the applicant goes and performs the flights. And the authority intervenes less. I don't know if the answer is sufficient.
Okay, I don't see any bad reaction. People that are not screaming. Are not screaming. Okay. Thank you, Antonio. Okay, so you can read some questions on the Slido. How can I know the population, so the population density, the population not updated in countries? So I think that we covered this one yesterday. So yeah, at this moment, we don't have yet any approved service to provide population density. Each country, they may have their sources. We provided yesterday a possible source from an European project, and you will find then the link on the slides. It's also to keep in mind that SORA 2.5 in Europe will not be applicable before next year. So we need to wait that JARUS finish the consultation, address the comments. So I don't know, maybe if I hope that they will be able to publish SORA 2.5 by the end of this year. This is at the goal, but then I think it depends a lot on how many comments and what are the complexity of comments. And then EASA, then after we will publish as direct publication, and we take a few months then to implement into the European system. So we can expect sometime at the beginning of next year, not before. So this means that we have some time then to develop this, to identify the minimum requirements for the service that could provide population density data as we discussed yesterday. Population density means inhabitant, not actual present people over duration of the day, per definition. So I think I want to make clear that what we need is the dynamic population density. So we need to understand how many people are exposed at risk. And then also will be important to know which of these people are sheltered, which of those people are sheltered. So we need to find also how to have also this kind of information. So population density will mean how many people really may be hit in case of a crash of a drone. The next, can control ground area be considered for industrial sites where the population is actually under the full responsibility on the site owner operation? So, as I said yesterday, the SORA identified only the air safety risk. So air safety means that we need to make sure that uninvolved people are protected. So now, when you're flying in an industrial site, first of all, you need to do an additional assessment to identify if the crash of the drone over the industrial site may provide other risks. So maybe some kind of explosion, some kind of problem that we may create some pollution, so whatever. And then people, so the worker that are working in the industrial site, they may become involved person if they comply with the requirements to be involved person that I remind that are, first of all, the person needs to accept to fly, to be present in the area where the operation takes place. Second, this person should be informed, should be briefed on what are the procedures they need to follow in case the drone is crashing. And third, they also need to be aware that they are alerted with enough time in order to apply those procedures. So if these three elements are applicable, then this can be involved person, and then you can do operation also in industrial sites and consider then a control ground area. If no one else, then these people that have been now involved are present.
And depending on your legal framework, there's still probably an obligation that you don't kill your own employees.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, this is what is the procedure? The procedure is to make sure that you don't kill your employees.
Exactly.
Yeah. Exactly.
You're still liable, even if the SORA doesn't consider it.
What about drones heavier than 250 grams, but which are still rather small than that will be in cell 3 and 4, flying over population density? I think that we discussed already similar question yesterday. We were considering, the question was up to yesterday, if we consider drone up to 900 grams that are using the same threshold of open category. Yep. Why this question?
If I can complement.
Okay.
Shortly. Actually, in fact, everything in the SORA should work. And if you take this example, and if I connect it with the mitigation means, with the means of compliance and mitigation means that we are going hopefully to publish soon. In that case, could be well a case in which a drone is granted -1 point of ground risk class because of a methodology explained in this document linked with a maximum kinetic energy of impact on ground. We are identifying in this document a simple, probably the simplest criteria is this that we have now is 170 joules of kinetic energy, impact kinetic energy, so not transmitted by impact. And that could be verified also by an operator. You do not need to be a manufacturer of the drones to verify that. And in that case, you already would get -point of ground risk class, and then it would be counted in the overall safety assessment.
Thank you, Antonio. Do confirm that this will be covered by the event that we are planning in a few weeks on mitigation?
The workshop?
Yeah.
Yeah, a few weeks. It's the 22nd of February, yes.
So we are covering all this topic.
Yeah.
Okay. So there will be a dedicated workshop on this topic on the 22nd of February. There will be here in IASA, and but remote participation also will be possible. Thank you. So this means that there are options that will be may be addressed by IASA, but in addition, we may also make some changes in SORA 2.5. So please add these comments and we will discuss. The next question is also for you, Antonio. Is there a certification specification for the parachute and flight termination system?
Yes. Again, making reference to this document, the one methodology and the first example, in fact, we have is the one of the parachute recovery system compliant with the ASTM standard, which I never remember the number, F33. Thank you. And that case is one of the cases of, and the simplest one for the parachute recovery system. You have the parachute recovery system provided with this proof of ASTM compliance for specific drones, because the ASTM compliance with the standard comes with the compliance to specific drone types. And in that case, the evidence that the operator would have to assemble is limited.
Thank you. So the next one, to use M1 at medium robustness level and get a -2, one should reduce the exposed population density by 99%, which sounds quite complex to demonstrate. How is that easily doable? This is for you. Please.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Nate, for the question. Well, actually, there's multiple ways. If you want to do a reduction by one method by 99%, I agree with you. This can be a complex demonstration. For instance, if you use a tool that might be on the market soon where you can analyze the exact number of people in that area dynamically. And if you can show that this is actually 2 orders of magnitude reduced, you can actually quantitatively demonstrate that you reach the 99% reduction. But in most cases, it's actually easier to use 2 methods like combining shelter and, for instance, use a time of day limitation that you'd only fly certain times of the day where the population density in that area is lower. So you combine 2 90% measures together, that becomes 99% done. But both are possible.
Okay, thank you. So we can move to the next question. How do you provide assurance, assure the low altitude data if INSP have no infrastructure to supply this, and hobby network are not resilient? Maybe this Andrea can.
So I understand the question at referring to the airspace data. So it is indeed a deficiencies we have at the moment. So we know it's a clear fact that we have in the airspace aircraft which are not conspicuous. So having a 100% picture of who flies where, we are just not there yet. Which means that the conspicuity required, so the detection requirement that we have in the TMPRs are at the moment rather qualitative. And the biggest impact that it has on giving that assurance also to you as the operator and the authority is actually the location where you fly. So most of the BVLOS approvals, to my knowledge at the moment, are location dependent. So you may fly in a city, you might fly somewhere outside in the middle of nowhere maybe. And each location might have its own particularities. So at the moment, even though we don't have this data and no infrastructure to have this 100% confidence, there are still cases where with a certain degree of confidence, we could say, for example, that no paragliders would fly over a very busy city. So we could already take that risk out of the equation. But it is one of the points of the SORA that requires a lot of discussion and a lot of this local specific assessment. So I encourage you to, whenever you are confronted with this, to try to get in contact with what is around the location, what is actually flying in that area, and try to organize it at the moment through the coordination. Unfortunately, bilateral, but it's not impossible.
Just a fun addition, maybe. We're all aware that uspace is coming, right? And if you want to install a uspace, you need to do a risk assessment of how much traffic you actually have at the low altitude. So how can you install a uspace when you don't have this data? It's the same question. I see what just turned around.
Okay, thank you. So next, the remote pilot has to operate only one drone at a time in a standard scenario and predefine risk assessment. But when the remote pilot operates multiple drones at a time, will be addressed by SORA and be classified as SAIL 4 or below, or will be certified category as operation. I would try to start just a little bit, but then I leave the floor to York. So this is what I think it will depend on the level of automation. So we always need to remind that all the at this moment the regulation has been defined as to have one person that is always responsible for the conduction of the flight, and this is the remote pilot. We said yesterday that when tomorrow we will be able to have fully autonomous drones, this means that we'll have a system based on artificial intelligence that may be certified in order to ensure that there is a sufficient reliability. Then we may change the level of responsibility. So this means that as long as the operator is able to demonstrate that this person is able to control all drones in a way that is safe according to the procedures, according to the level of automation, then this will be possible. I don't know which SAIL will be. This will depend on several conditions. It will be assessed, I think, case by case. That doesn't mean that will be always be the certified category. Depends on the SORA.
I agree, and basically this is something that is one of the weaknesses of the current SORA, that it does not deal well with swarms or multiple drone operations. In general, this should be possible, but there's little guidance in there on how to do this and how to weigh the factors. And that is something that should be considered in the future.
Okay, thank you. Next, I think you already answered something similar, so I will give you. How populated is considered a dense maritime traffic for a SORA analysis? For example, in the channels of a major industrial area.
You know, what I would do is, you know, when you have this, you first tell me how many ships you're talking about. What is dense maritime traffic? I'm not a maritime guy. I have no idea. First, you tell me how many ships per square kilometer and how many people are on the ships, and then you tell me what the population density is. But you may use shelter. I mean, there's no right answer to this question. It depends, right?
Okay, so next, this is exactly so this for you, York. Is there a possibility to extend the deadline of 6 March of external consultation, since we have a large number of pages to review?
You may ask that our secretariat. You know, I have a conflict of interest here because, you know, if I extend the deadline, I have more comments to answer. So don't ask me.
Yeah, so consider also that then more we extend and further will be the applicability of SORA 2.5. But I think that you may ask.
And one more thing, a normal JARIS consultation is 1 month. And that we usually extend to 1.5 months. We used 3 months this time for good reasons, because it's a lot of documents. And it's not the Christmas break that's upcoming, right? So you've heard my opinion.
Okay, so next, JARUS reference on Annex G for the use of reduced air risk class. This annex is still out for consultation since many years. It is also not available on the website. When isn't envisaged that JARUS will publish this annex, and if it's not to be published, then why make reference to it in the current SORA?
That's an interesting trade-off. Yes, it is referenced because, you know, it still is a missing annex. That's why it's listed. And, you know, we have to suffer through receiving the complaints, like, where is it? Where can I download it? Or we could just publish as it currently is. The question is, what's worse? Looking at Terry this moment. He's not nodding or shaking his head. So this is actually the dilemma here. We decided not to publish it and it's basically stop the development and basically wait for the revision of the ARIS model. That's why. But then should we remove the reference to it? One thing I know there is a reference to it in, and it is basically very delayed, but there's no right and wrong in this case. You know, EASA could remove the reference to Annex G if you wanted. You did already?
If I remember, in the European SORA, I will remove it because we could not reference to something that is not published. If I remember well. So, okay, next question. Additional question to use M1 mitigation, precise location of operation. How accurate the operator needs to be when applying location for operation, and how acceptable is using study that people spend most of their time indoors. It is about M1 law. I can talk about indoors, but then for the second part of the question, I need to help of someone here. So just want to remind that the drone regulation is not applicable for the indoor operation, even if this, I don't think it's, the question was like to be different, but just to remind that the drone regulation is only applicable when operations are in the European sky, so it means outside of building. Yeah, I know that this was a bit different, but we give me the opportunity to repeat this one, and we can consider that also if you are operating within a cage, even if it's not really a ceiling, and you demonstrate that the drone cannot fly away, this will be considered still an indoor operation. But then for the main question, who can help?
I mean, the second one is it's about studies of people spend most of the time indoors. That's the reason for the shelter mitigation. I mean, yes, of course you can do that. We added that for that reason. And the first part of the question, it's, my favorite answer in those kind of cases is it depends, right? It depends on what your claim is. If you have an outrageous claim, you need, outrageously extravagant evidence. If it's only a small correction within the orders of magnitude system, then you don't have to be very accurate. It depends on your safety case that you're presenting to the authority. So there's no clear answer.
But I was thinking that maybe we may identify some guidance, something to help to identify some reference. I don't know, maybe something that we can work with at European level.
It's good to be done, Charles level 2.
Yeah. Yeah, Charles level as well. Yeah. Okay, we will consider. Thank you. Next, how could exceptional vehicles, specifically lighter than air drone airship manufacturers and operators, which have radically different ground air risk factor and therefore sea level than heavier than air fixed wing and drones, be addressed in SORA 2.5? I want to provide what we are doing in Europe, but this is something then you can say what we are doing in JARUS. So yeah, this is a known issue. When the SORA was developed, was having in mind a piece of metal. Then it was a 3 meter, 5 meter, whatever. But then here, when it's lighter than air, things may be different. The ground is may be different. So this is why you may notice that we published in the MPA for the certified category that we published last year, 2022-06, we published a proposal to modify the article in the regulation 945 that is identifying when a certificate is always needed. Then following the SORA, whenever you are flying with a drone more than 3 meters over assembly of people, to modify to say except when the drone is lighter than air, because we have this in mind. Then the second step would be to have to fix the ground risk class to identify what is the real risk class for this kind of drones. But this is something that we may do within JARUS, I guess.
Yes, it's a very good point. What the SORA currently says is if you have an unusual configuration that doesn't fit, talk to your competent authority and figure it out. Make a one-off decision. Unfortunately, those can produce very different results from country to country, obviously. So some guidance should be supplied in the future. I'm sure that if you use Annex F, for instance, I think Annex F cannot handle lighter than air very well. So we have to have a discussion on that and see how we could better do that. I've known from authorities that have dealt with it that, for like a big blimp, for instance, you'd simply look at the hard pieces that actually can hurt someone, what is their size, and use the ground truth table for that. But there's ways to deal with it, but there's no clear harmonized guidance yet. You can do that. I would suggest go to your authority, make a deal with them for your particular situation.
Thank you. So the next question is for Antonio. Parachutes are not always an option due weight or flight high. Does EASA consider any other device or procedures to apply an M2?
Yes, absolutely. It is true that parachute is not the only option. And absolutely, we include other methodologies. In fact, it is interesting how we shaped this document that I hope you will see soon. It has a core chapter, which is a general means of compliance, which is an open approach for methodologies. And is in particular, let's say, referred or dedicated to manufacturer or of UIS or of the mitigation means. And then these general means of compliance, according to which you, for example, you might have a speed limiter, or you might have a means of compliance based on control surfaces that at the moment in which there is a loss of control and the crash, constrain the unmanned aircraft to crash in such a way that the crash area is limited, just to make a couple of examples. And then there are some examples in the chapter 3 of the means of compliance of application of the MOC, of the general MOC, which are also for operators. And we are really trying hard to create some examples for which the operator can directly use, and without reading the whole chapter 2, which can be quite, let's say, not complex, but you need to be a manufacturer or of a mitigation means or of a UAS to use it. The operator can go directly to the chapter 3 and take the example if they want to apply these examples. Okay.
Thank you. So just for those that are using Slido, apparently we are having some strange problems. So even if there are questions with a higher vote are not showing as in the top priority. So Leonardo will try to pop up. Okay. I don't know the reason. It was nothing that was done by us. Okay, so next, considering two drones with completely different masses but same speed and dimension, should the heavier drone pose a higher ground risk, hence higher intrinsic ground risk class? SORA 2.0 had this into consideration by having kinetic energy into consideration. How is that considering SORA 2.5? Want to, White?
I will try. But first of all, the first thing comes to mind is, when I was in university and had to learn how to design an aircraft, there are certain design trade-offs. To have completely different masses, but the same cruise speed and dimension is interesting because that is not easy to achieve, just as a side note. So I find this question quite hypothetical. Shouldn't the heavy drone pose a higher ground risk? Well, if the small drone is heavy enough that at its given speed is able to kill you, the heavier drone is able to kill you at least 2 or 3 times. In the end, you don't care how often you are killed in your life. Once is enough. So the ground risk model takes into account like how big is the critical area. And that is a function of how big you are, then your impact angle, and how many people you can potentially touch and therefore potentially kill. There's not that much difference. The heavier drone might have a longer slide, but I've also learned that it's actually not that huge of a difference. So the debate was had when developing the updated ground risk model. Do we need to keep the kinetic energy, or can we simplify and live with potential inaccuracies? Actually, it's not that much more inaccurate because we did a lot of modeling with different sizes of planes and so on. It did have a big impact, but cruise speed is a lot easier to handle than if you force the applicants to compute kinetic energy, which is also an entry door into trying to cheat by using forged coefficients of drag and similar interesting measures. So it was decided it's a much better idea to just stick to speed. It does not, it's interesting, if you look at the modeling, it does not have that huge influence as you think.
Thank you. So I think that's also because we need to have a trade-off between simplicity and being precise. So we can be as precise as we want, but then it will be very complex. So, and then you can always go to Annex F and apply the actual formula and be more precise. Which aspect decide if a DVR is required for Cell 3 or not? Okay, so this is a question that may be tricky. So you know that we had a debate so far in Europe, which level of risk would require to have a verification from EASA on the design. So at the beginning, we were considering that all drones that were in Cell 3 and Cell 4 they, and then say 5 and say 6 as well, needs to have a verification from EASA. So we were trying to do some, to run some use case to identify really what is the level of risk, and also to try to be proportionate. And at the end, in coordination with the European authority, we decided DBR should always be required in SAIL 4. Now, in SAIL 3, when will be required? We can say that in the future, we will publish, as I said, means of compliance where we identify standards. So this means that when a manufacturer is showing is complying with the standard, is declaring they comply with the standard that is accepted by EASA, and they supply also some evidence on how these standards are complied with, maybe nothing more is necessary. If instead they are using a different technology that has been not yet explored, so we don't know how good then the drone may be, or so this means that they are not using the standard that is used by, approved by EASA. And also today, until we don't have this standard, this transitory period, then the competent authority, they need to try to have a feeling of what will be the possible risk. So at this moment, it will be based on the competent authority. They will decide. I don't know if anyone from the competent authority here want to complement. A question? If you can come here, please.
So in this previous, is there any connection? Is it relevant for SORA 2, or is there connection to SORA 2.5? Or is this realistic that we could have a SAIL 3 aircraft without design verification already when we do the SORA 2?
So the level of risk between SORA 2.0 and SORA 2.5 for each SAIL or for each ground risk class did not change. So the operation that was, you can say risky or not risky in SAIL 3, in SORA 2, is also a same level of risk in SORA 2.5. So from this point of view, there will be no difference. Okay, the next from Yves Morier. So very nice to the opportunity to say hello to Yves Morier. It was one of the no, it's not that anymore. Okay. Easy answers, okay. Just to have the opportunity to say hello to Yves Morier. It was one of the person that was the main contributor of all this drone regulation when he was here in EASA. But I'm sorry, I cannot read your question anymore now. Maybe later. Okay, let's go to the next. What if the operational volume is in a sparsely populated area and M1 is used, but the adjacent area is a populated area? Regarding point 2 of step 9, if does not imply that I have to use enhanced containment, although I should use, for example, flight elimination system to avoid flying into a higher area with adjacent area. Do you agree? Do you agree?
I agree that this is a SORA 2.0 question, because it does make sense for SORA 2.5. If I look at it, I read it multiple times, and I think this is directed at 2.0. So I'm not sure what to answer now.
Okay, thank you. So Yves is back. So let's read the question from Yves. What are the requirements for the entity nominated by the authority? Is it a qualified entity? So this is, I think it was a good opportunity also to remind again what yesterday I think we touched very briefly. So the basic regulation, that is one developed by the European Parliament, give the opportunity to all competent authority, being the national competent authority or EASA, to make use of what is called qualified entities. So qualified entities are entities that may conduct some activity on behalf of the competent authority, So have different level of privileges depending on how the competent authority want to use it. And there is an annex in the basic regulation that identify what are the minimum requirements that this entity needs to comply with in order to be qualified by the competent authority. And once they receive this privilege and they issue a certificate, the certificate issued by this qualifying entity is the same as was issued by the competent authority if they have this kind of privilege. So this means that it will be valid then all over Europe. So it's quite a powerful tool. So this is a possibility that is always possible. And now at this moment, I'm not sure how much today is used in the European member state. I'm not aware that any European member state used this yet. Maybe in the future may provide. But in addition, we introduced here in drone regulation another level of entity. Because there was an experience, especially in some countries like in France and Spain, where they were using operator to conduct some training for what was the national standard, the national scenario in France and in Spain. And you can see that we introduced in the European standard scenario the concept of the recognized entities. So our entity that are just recognized, not qualified, meaning that the qualified needs to go through the full process defined by the basic regulation. So it's quite a complex accreditation. While instead the recognized entity, since our entity that will conduct some activity and then will propose to the competent authority the outcome of the verification. But the competent authority will always keep the competence to review the documentation and decide if they want to issue the certificate or not. Then they can define what are the requirements for this recognized entity. So it's a simplified process. Yesterday we learned from Filippo that there is an ISO standard that already define different level for qualified entity that, and I understand that this may also consider what we call recognized entity. So we may in the future check if the standard may be a good means of compliance. We will see. But who is the author of Annex 6? Is in the room. On the left side of the room? My left side. Okay. So we have people that are very expert here on the requirements for the qualified entity. Thank you, Philip. Okay. So next, flying a drone in controlled airspace with permission and coordination from air traffic center must be one of the safest ways of conducting the flight. Yet the ARIS class for flying a drone above 120 meters above ground is higher than in unregulated airspace. Should this be the other way around? And I see that Jörg is already ready to answer. Please.
Well, first of all, which controlled airspace? If we're talking about airspace echo, where aircraft that are not, equipped with transponders and not coordinating with ATC fly around too, no, this doesn't work. If the controlled airspace is airspace delta or higher, what we do is a coordination with the ANSP on how to reserve some space, chunk of the airspace for the drone. That's a coordinated activity, which in the SORA system is a strategic errors mitigation, where the authority will check that you actually have this deal with the ANSP, with the ATC, right? Where you can show, well, oh yeah, you actually do have procedures how to coordinate because your drone is not really outfitted to be a VFR or IFR flight. So I think it's correct this way. The general criticism that's hidden in there is this errors model somehow feels weird. Like, why is controlled airspace always the highest errors category? And that is something that should be addressed in the SORA 3.0. I'm going to answer the next question. When is expected the SORA 3.0? Soon. Exactly.
2030. Please.
I would like to complement what Jörg just said. I think at the moment, each controlled areas or each flight in a controlled airspace, it's still slightly different. So there is a high say, local conditions or specificities that might impact your flight. There are cases where a controller might say, where the agreement with the air traffic control might be that, yes, we will tell you where other flights are. Sometimes it might go as far, theoretically, right? It might go as far as to allow separation, but these are really extreme cases. So the wording matters whenever you have this agreement and whenever you coordinate with an air traffic control center. I think it's very important to be clear on this differentiation, because it's very seldom, at least to my knowledge, I very rarely heard about cases where air traffic control would actually allow this mitigation by actively separating a drone from a manned aircraft.
David Guerin again, just to complement that, if it's 35 years as an air traffic controller in Europe and Australia, and 20 years as a volunteer researcher in ATM, there are no procedures that allow, official procedures that allow air traffic controllers to respond to a drone in their airspace. It's not IFR, it's not VFR, it doesn't exist, I'm afraid to say. But there is nothing that allows an air traffic controller to separate a drone from other aircraft. It doesn't exist. So locally, procedures may be developed between an operator and the air traffic control service provider, and that's, that is rare, but it does happen. When you come to Class G airspace, of course, air traffic control does not provide any separation between anyone, so it becomes even murkier. So I just thought I'd point that out. Thank you.
Thank you. So next question. Normally, one basis in SORA 2.0 is that you never change from column of GRC, the ground risk class, when using mitigation. Why are you showing it the opposite in your example with M2 mitigation in your example? Can we assume that it will certainly be possible in SORA 2.5? Maybe I want to clarify first, so why I did this, because I want to clarify that yesterday I tried to simplify. So I was, in some cases, so I need to define a trade-off between precision and simplicity. So in reality, you are not supposed to change class, but I wanted to give the understanding that when we apply mitigation M1 and we are saying that we are reducing the population at risk, in reality, we are saying that we have a level of risk that is equivalent to what is, so the higher row, when instead we are applying M2, we are saying that we have a level of risk that is equivalent to the column on the left. So it was just a way to simplify and give you a better understanding of what is the philosophy behind. Do you want to complement, Jörg?
Nothing to add. You're right.
Thank you. This question is for you, Thomas. So I will. So why dangerous area is not considered as atypical? I just want to introduce it to remind a typical airspace in the SORA language means that the probability of encountering another aircraft is very low, is negligible. So this means that either the area, remember, there is a NOTAM for a temporary segregated area, such that everybody, all the manned aviation is informed that nobody should enter. Or we showed yesterday, you are flying very close to an obstacle, so no manned aircraft will fly close to a power plant, a power line, for example. Or you are flying at very, very low height, below 30 meters, and also, unless you are landing, you are not flying at that height. Now, I think that there is also a confusion on what is the meaning of dangerous area. So I ask you, Thomas, if you can clarify the meaning of dangerous area.
I'm a German and I'm an officer, former officer. I'm straightforward and I have to say I cannot provide a clear answer on this one. I need to owe it to you.
So the dangerous areas are part of, you probably might know, like they have a NOTAM just informing for an awareness. If something is happening, then you have a dangerous area where the information is being provided with a higher level of, say, the warning sign. And then there might be also restricted areas. Further on, prohibited areas where nothing flies. So the danger area is one of the artifacts that comes originally from the manned aviation. It's something standard used on a day-to-day basis. but it is being applied differently in every state. So there are areas where there are countries where if a danger area is published, for example, you cannot, as a manned aviation pilot or unmanned, you cannot enter it without prior coordination. However, there are other parts of the world where it's just a warning, so it doesn't imply a requirement for coordination. And because of the specificities, a dangerous area might be, if the local conditions are as such that you can consider atypical, like Natales mentioned before, because of the characteristics of that particular rule in that particular country, then you can consider that the risk of encounter is as low as an atypical airspace. However, this is not the default case everywhere.
Yeah, so just to add on, generally speaking, a danger area cannot be considered empty. Therefore, it's not atypical. It probably is used less. It might count, but it's not a restricted area. It's just a danger area. I've flown through danger areas many times. I like danger.
I think it's also there is another element is the legal certainty. So if you publish a nota with a temporary segregated area, then if someone enters the area, they are doing an illegal flight. If he says it's a dangerous area, everybody can take the risk to enter. So you may expect that someone may decide to enter. Okay. Next, we see that Mikael is a little bit unhappy with the principle in the training on SAIL 1 and SAIL 2. He said that I've trained more than 1,000 pilots over the past 5 years. 90% of them were dangerous for one reason or another at the start of training. SORA should emphasize formation more than adjacent area. Pilot's error are more common than drone one.
Yes.
I think that's maybe, yeah, there is a declaration, yeah.
What you do is an operational authorization, right? Which means this is about what the operator, the organization does. What we want to see is, do you have a system to qualify your people? And what are your entry requirements for your pilots to fly in your organization? That is what the authority checks if an operator takes care of that. Not how the pilots are actually then trained, what those entry requirements are. The next thing is, for that reason, SAIL 1 and 2 have no airworthiness requirements. The whole safety is built upon organizational safety and training requirements. Because yes, you're absolutely right in your question. The pilot errors are more common than the drone ones. That is why the SORA and SAIL 1 and 2 first focuses on the operational procedures, on the manuals and training, and all the precautions that you have to take at the organizational level. And this continues at SAIL 3. At SAIL 3, you have the first low robustness and medium robustness airworthiness requirements. But the organizational requirements for this operational procedures are already high and need authority review for that reason.
Hi, this question is mostly for people from EASA. I might be wrong, but I have the feeling that there is a gap between the containment requirements in low sail levels in specific category and open category. Let's imagine a drone that's operating in A3 subcategory, which if I am not wrong, I could have built in my own garage, and I fill the requirements for safety distances, but I am close enough to areas with higher ground or air risk. However, I would have no particular containment requirements, at least not medium or high, I guess. Am I wrong, or is this a reality? Thank you. And if it is a reality, how are you planning to work on that?
I'm not sure if I understand the question correctly, but I think the main difference, what I just pointed out, the specific category at the low sales is on operational safety, while the open category there are some requirements on pilot training, on some pilot qualifications. They have to know a little bit. They don't really have to show that they really can fly, for instance, and that the drone in the A3 doesn't really matter. So the main difference here is that we can allow in the specific category to enter more risky situations because they are not really risky, because the operator has some qualifications. There are checklists, there are procedures, and those are the most common errors. This is being covered. That's why, I think this is not really a problem. Or I did not understand the question correctly. This is also a possibility. Okay. Yes. So the question was if the containment requirements are actually too low for these kind of operations in the open category, because open category containment requirements are quite low. That is a good point. We believe that the containment requirements in the SORA, it's of course my position, right? They are very correct. Otherwise, we wouldn't have written them. Generally speaking, it usually says that basic containment is probably enough for 95% of all cases. The low containment, the new low. And what's the new low really actually contain? It says, if you see that you lose control, have a means to end the flight. When I was a lot younger, had a lot more hair, I used to fly model airplanes. And when I was, I think, 16 or 17 years old, I managed to do my only flyaway because, my procedures in ensuring the safety of the installation of avionics was not really that great. I have learned, and I've never lost an aircraft again because I took some more precautions. All in all, when an airplane flies away, even if it's a model aircraft, and I lose sight of it, I usually kill the engine. That is a dependent flight termination as described in low robustness containment. It's the same thing, basically. Is it explicitly named in the open category for A3? I'm not sure. But it would make sense, I think. It's not a difficult requirement.
Yeah, so we have some requirements in the C1, C2, and C3 that are that verify to the class marking. That we address containment. We have the return norm. We have other requirements that, so for example, we have a height limitation to reduce the possibility that the aircraft will penetrate a higher level. So, and all these requirements are verified through the C marking process. So there is the first difference between the open category and the specific category lower risk is that there is no verification of the design for the specific category. It is mandated like it is mandated for the open category. Now, we can, I think also one of the next activities we want to do is to verify if there is more consistency using also SORA 3.5 between the open and the specific category. But there are, so we think that the basic containment requirements are included in the requirements that we are there for the open category. Okay. So there was a question on the chat regarding asking for additional information on the workshop for the mitigation. Antonio, if you can.
Yes.
Right?
Sure. So this workshop is linked with the public consultation of this document, means of compliance to mitigation means and tool of the SORA, that we intend to start Tuesday next week. This is the plan. This document has been created by the airworthiness task force of the UIS technical body. So yes, EASA is consulting, but in reality, EASA is consulting on behalf of the airworthiness task force. Right? So it's a document pre-agreed among all authorities in Europe. And in fact, we are now consulting industry. So it is quite important that this document is reviewed some days before the workshop by industry who participate in the workshop, so the workshop will be better prepared, let's say. We need absolutely to publish a link in the information on our website. And in fact, I was talking with Alberto, and we will take care. We are encouraging in-person participation, so to come here in EASA. It will be hybrid, yes. Nevertheless, we would welcome participants in EASA. We will have at least 60, 70 seats. And for the moment, I have, I think, 6 or 7 people who said they will participate in person. So there's still many places available, let's say, if you would like to come here.
Next question. As I currently understand M2 criterion 1 and footnotes 1 and 2, you can always apply M1 law in village or cities if drone is below 25 kilos, as it states that people are on average only 10% of the time outside. Thus, in practice a 90% reduction and thus reduction of GRC of -1. Is this correct? Who want to answer this question? Personally, I think that yes. It's so if you have data showing that people are sheltered, and then only 10% of the people that are actually resident in that area are exposed to risk. Yes.
Basically, we could even think about turning this around. There are exceptions. Usually this is the case, but there are some exceptions where people are really more outside in certain areas. And how to...
For example, during soccer games.
Those are great examples. Now I have to be careful what to say. Maybe you should fly drones. No, so it's on a more serious note. I'm from a non-carnival background, so I don't get it.
I hear you loud and clear.
But interestingly, let me add this. When we did the discussion on containment, we were quite sure that we only need to look at average population density until we got to corner cases where those average population density don't work. And I think the reference case was some crazy event in Zurich where the streets were full of people. I think that qualifies as carnival as well. It's a different thing, I know. My apologies to Switzerland, but it's Friday already. The carnival situation is when you have that many people and you want to film the carnival because it's so many people and it is a pretty picture with the drone, you might get into areas where containment is triggered, although the average adjacent GRC is not high enough. And therefore, because of that reason, there is a provision to cater for these situations in the new step 8. Look it up and you will see, and think about the carnival example that we just had.
In Switzerland.
In Switzerland, Swiss carnival. Not in Cologne, of course. No containment needed in Cologne.
Okay, next question. SORA shall be business oriented. For business, it is critical to know time windows. Okay, I understand that there is some need for having quick procedures to available authorization. I want to remind that SORA is an aviation risk assessment. So take, as we said yesterday, to make sure that there is all aviation risks are under control. I understand that then each party, they have their interest. For some people, business may be, I know it's very important, but we need to always make sure that first the operation is safe and then the operation is economically feasible. But safety is first, and to have the right balance for sure. But safety for sure. So SORA is not business oriented. SORA is a safety oriented. And member states, for everybody, this is something new. So all of us are learning. At the beginning, it takes a little bit more time to find the solution. We saw now that from the presentation this morning that in Germany now there is a proposal for an operation manual that is drastically reducing the time needed to assess an authorization. So It's a battle. We go there, and hopefully we will find the right balance.
Just to add on, Christopher, if you're still here, please disagree with me. But I think with the situation that we have in Germany now, there are long wait times. So you submit an application and you have to wait for quite a while before you get an authorization. But the actual processing time, an officer needs to evaluate your application and discuss it with you and eventually authorize it, is already quite low. The problem is it's an effect because of it's a new task, new people have to be hired, new people have to be trained at the authority, and the run-up was simply not quick enough, and that produced this big backlog, and I've heard from other nations that have similar issues. So it's not really a problem of SORA or a specific category of EASA, it's a problem of reality inside the NAAs. But I think it will improve, and a couple of years from now, we'll laugh about this. I hope.
Maybe a small remark. I think there is, not to repeat what was already said, I can also say for us, it's a similar situation. We try to be as fast as we can. There is, however, something that you can do, I mean, or the operator can do. What we had in some cases is that in the feedback process, so, you know, you apply, then comes the feedback from the authority and back and forth. I think it would help us a lot if you are also fast. Because we had cases, and maybe there are, I mean, of course, not every time, but there are cases where it takes quite a while to receive the feedback. And as you can imagine, the person that has read that document maybe half a year ago and then receives an update and then again has to go through it. So that adds additional delays. So if you can be efficient on your side, that would also be a help in this, in making the process more efficient.
Good. So it was quite a long, I think, question and answer period. I think that we have a time for one last question. Is there any question here on the floor? Otherwise, we read the one that is on the. Please, come here.
Yeah, it's a question I received through text. The question is can you combine a flight with a part of SORA, a part of STS, PDRA in one, let's say, application?
Yeah, thank you. This so yesterday we were mentioning that also, yeah, we need to find the right balance between prescription, so to reduce the amount of negotiation that is needed between the authority and the operator in order to conduct a safe operation. So this means that this may be reached having very prescriptive PDRA. This is how we wrote PDRA S01, S02, or how we wrote standard scenario 1 and 2 that at the end are the same operation. This in turn will provide a quick authorization, or other that are a little bit more flexible where you can modify things, but then you need to show to the competent authority that you are good. So into some kind of negotiation, it will take some time. We are entertaining a discussion with the authorities to find a way to make the PDRA more usable, to find the right balance, so we'll improve. So this means that I think that all of you may at least use the PDRA as a reference when you want to do an operation. And so you can, if you see that some elements of the PDRA may be applicable and there is a procedure that is there, you can refer to that one in your application. And then all the rest will be verified according to the SORA process. So if you think that you can do it, you can take some piece here and there. But otherwise, a PDRA should be used as it is. Otherwise, then the authority cannot provide you a quick assessment if you are compliant. They need to review the SORA anyway. So it will be a complete SORA assessment anytime you make a major change for the PDRA. So it's exactly 1 o'clock. I think that we can wrap up.
So not making too many jokes about Switzerland, but this one I can't swallow. 1 o'clock on the dot, and we are running according like a Swiss clockwork. That's what I wanted to say. 1.5 interesting days, and in your case, I hope +1 interesting evening in Cologne come to an end. This was a very educational exercise, including for me, potentially more for me than for you, who are the experts in our member states and beyond. Thank you for coming here. I would like to express particular thanks to our speakers, Andrea from Switzerland, Jörg from Germany, and Christopher, also from the LBA here in the back. Thank you very much for having volunteered to contribute valuable content to this session and to sharing your respective experience. I would also not want to miss expressing my gratefulness to my team, not only here on the stage, but also behind the scenes, and our technician in the back room over there, plus many people who have contributed in the preparation, Mandy and Laurie, just to give examples. Thank you very much for you. We hope that we have been hosting you appropriately. Sorry for the quality of the coffee. Sorry for the lack of water. We will work on those. I was not happy with those 2 aspects, but I'm very happy to say that I was very happy with many other aspects. Again, with the constructive atmosphere and the climate that was here in the room, and also in the chat and on the Slido system. So thank you very much for coming forward, for engaging, for showing interest. And we wish you now a very safe and comfortable journey back home into your countries. There is one award I would like to give, and that is for Professor Terry Martin for the longest distance travel to come to visit us here and to be here in person. From Australia, if I understand correctly. Wow. So that's the award for the longest journey. With this, I would like to close this event. We have rarely had events of that scale, being open house, both hybrid, people by the hundreds in person here, and even by the thousands, or clearly more than 1,000 connected online. There have been few technical hiccups. I understand we will also address those for the next time. But this has been an exceptionally, in terms of scope, also from that perspective, an exceptional event for us. Thank you very much. Have a safe journey home. The meeting is closed.